I'll call to order this meeting of the Salem City Council for Monday, November 13th, 2023. If the recorder will please call the roll.
Councillor Stapleton.
I'm here.
Councillor Nishioka.
Here.
Councillor Phillips.
Here.
Councillor Gwynn.
Here.
Councillor Gonzalez.
Here.
Councillor Hoy.
Here.
Councillor Nordyke.
Here.
Councillor Varney.
Here.
Mayor Hoy.
Here. If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Councillor Stapleton, do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Not tonight.
All right. It's now time for council and city manager comment. Do we have any? All right. Oh, Councillor Gonzalez.
I just want to thank everybody for voting. Last week, obviously, is very heated issue. One of the things that I shared with people around me is that even though there were two choices amongst us councilors, I think there was a spectrum of where we all fell. But it was great to see people voted. So.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nordyke.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and thank you folks for watching at home. I want to say thank you to the Southwest Association of Neighbors, the Westminster Presbyterian Church, and my colleagues, Councilors Nishioka and Gwynn, for joining me for the All South Salem Town Hall last Tuesday. It was very well attended, great attendance, great questions, and great audience participation. So we were able to share a lot of updates with our residents of South Salem about what's going on in our fair city. And we made sure to leave plenty of time for Q&A. And that was such an outstanding opportunity. We had folks lining up with a microphone to give their name and their ward number, just to tell us what is on their mind. What are the things that keep them up at night? Is it public safety? Is it the affordability of housing? Housing for low-income seniors came up, for example. Homelessness came up. The payroll tax came up. These are the kinds of discussions that I think all of us as members of council should be having with our residents and our neighbors, and I encourage my peers on council to do your town halls in your neck of the woods. And if you'd like any suggestions or tips or lessons learned from me, I'm more than happy to sit down with you for a cup of coffee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any additional comments? Councillor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. I also want to express my appreciation of being in a democratic society and that the democratic process took place with the voting. I'm disappointed by the decision, but I'm ready to move forward, and I hope the rest of my council are looking forward to a task force and involvement in finding revenue. I also want to simply state, and this will probably be the last time I'll say anything, the celebration of life for Ron Ekus will be taking place on Saturday, January 6th from 2 to 5 at the Convention Center. And more information will be available, and if you'd like to reach out to me, I can provide that. Last weekend, I attended the Western Oregon University's open house for their occupational therapy doctorate program here in Salem, the Salem campus. And it's going to be a fantastic program that we'll have here. They expect to take 40 students for their doctorate in occupational therapy. And Salem Housing Authority sounds like they've been asked, and they're interested in being part of the training program, in the sense that the senior students will be able to come to the Housing Authority and provide occupational therapy for the residents. So what a great program, and I'm really glad to have had the opportunity to go see it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any additional comments? Councillor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've been reflecting lately on a bit of an abstract idea. I'm picturing Salem, our community, as a great, big, diverse family. Some in our family have been here for generations. Some only recently arrived. As family, we don't always see eye to eye as members, but we exist here together, and we make our way through every season, day after day, year after year. There's no doubt these are strange and troubling times. I wonder, why are so many in our family struggling? It seems many are losing control. Some are losing grip and resorting to extreme behaviors. Our sidewalks are riddled with family members, many of whom, thanks to the decriminalization of hard drugs, are addicted and are too wrapped up in their addiction to know they need help. No different than any family with an addict member, we are collectively chasing these brothers and sisters all over town. In the interest of their rights, we provide for their existence, and in truth, we are loving them only deeper into their addiction. We are subsidizing their behavior and perpetuating a path of destruction. They are the minority in this family, yet they command the most attention. They take the most energy, the most effort, the majority of our time, and as it is, a great deal of money. Those in this family with coping skills know how to eat the elephant one bite at a time, and we're hanging in there. Others are in denial. They choose not to look or engage. They may give money or a handout and hope someone, anyone, is working to solve the problem. This dysfunction has to stop. We need boundaries and expectations. Every family of an addict does. How is an entire city any different? We have a responsibility to provide the kind of help which treats addiction. We owe it to the addict, and we owe it to the whole great, big, beautiful family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Additional comments? Councillor Stapleton.
Thank you so much. I wrote out my comments tonight as well. Normally I kind of go by the fly, but I thought tonight was a good time for typing and reading. Reflecting on pivotal moments in life or work often involves revisiting the choices and milestones that led to them. Personally, I find myself pondering my initial vote on the payroll tax and wondering whether it was the right decision. Despite continuous self-reflection, my conclusion remains the same. I voted affirmatively to prevent cuts to vital services and support staff members. Unfortunately, the measure failed. There is no way to avoid cuts now. That could mean that people lose their lives. That could mean that people lose their housing. That does mean our employees will continue to be overworked and undersupported, and our residents will further negatively be impacted by cuts, not only to emergency services, but to things like parks, libraries, etc. Contemplating the city's future, I never envisioned a path of reducing services and making cuts. However, the recent outcome leaves us no alternative. Even before my time here as a city councilor, I recognized the structural imbalance in the budget and actively sought to address it. My dedication to understanding the city's history and challenges has allowed me to gain insight into the needs of our residents, the struggles of our employees, and the complexities of issues such as homelessness. It's disheartening to witness external influences like OBI, a statewide special interest organization who used our city as a pawn for their agenda. Despite this setback, I remain focused on a bright future for Salem. The recent defeat fueled by external interest was not about our community or its residents. It was about shielding businesses from any additional burdens. In the face of this challenge, I've learned valuable lessons about trust, collaboration, and the limits of trying to save those who may not want saving. Rather than dwelling on blame, I aim to maintain a professional and open stance, encouraging my colleagues to contribute proposals and suggestions to the difficult decisions that lie ahead. Admittedly, this speech may convey a sense of frustration and disappointment, as I share the collective sentiment of many who are passionate about addressing issues such as homelessness, funding for essential services, and broader societal concerns. Despite the challenges, I've actively sought workable solutions and demonstrated the courage to tackle difficult problems. As we anticipate discussions on future cuts, I hope my colleagues will join me at the table with constructive ideas and a willingness to find compromise. Every delay in addressing these issues translates to real-life impacts for our community and I remain hopeful that collectively we can navigate through these challenging times to build a better future for Salem. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Additional comments? All right, on to proclamations. And I have the great honor of welcoming the Tribal Chair of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz, Dolores Pigsley, up to join me up here to receive this proclamation. Welcome. So this proclamation recognizes Native American Awareness Week. Whereas Native American Awareness Week began in 1976 and recognition was expanded by Congress in August 1st, 1990, designating the month of November as I'm going to just slow down. It says National American Indian Heritage Month because it's now national. Whereas from time immemorial, Oregon lands have been home to many Native peoples, including members of Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribes. And whereas in 2020, the city of Salem signed an agreement with the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, and in 2021, the city signed an agreement with the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz in order to strengthen the relationship between the city and the tribes and facilitate improved communication and education about Native American heritage. And whereas Native Americans are descendants of the indigenous inhabitants of what is now the United States and have moving stories of tragedy, triumph, and perseverance that needs to be shared with future generations. And whereas our country is blessed by the character and strength exemplified by Native Americans who have answered the call of service in our armed forces in greater numbers per capita than any other group. And whereas we at the City of Salem affirm our commitment to working toward a community that fosters a deeper understanding, appreciation for the diversity of cultures, and celebrate all that Native Americans have contributed to make Salem a richer and more vibrant city. And now, therefore, I, Chris Hoy, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim November 2023 as Native American Heritage Month and ask that all residents of Salem join me in this special tribute to celebrate the contributions of Native Americans to our city and state and to commemorate this month with appropriate programs and activities. Dated this 13th day of November 2023.
I thank you very much, and greetings from the Confederated Tribes of Siletz. And it just so happens this is our 46th year of tribal restoration, and we have a big celebration at the coast on Saturday, a powwow that starts at 6, and a little program we have in the afternoon. And so you're welcome to attend. I greatly appreciate this proclamation, and I think we've come a long ways. And I thank you all for this. It's really nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now we have National Runaway Prevention Month, and we have Winter Shoot and Paul Fairchild from Church at the Park, Shante Frisbee from Northwest Human Services, Christopher Lopez and Mercedes Thorrington from Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency. Hello. You're not all of those names, so oh, there you are. Come on, scooch in a little bit. All right. This is a proclamation recognizing National Runaway Prevention Month. Whereas November is recognized as National Runaway Prevention Month, and November 17th is Light the Night to bring further awareness to the issue of runaway youth. And whereas National Runaway Prevention Month began in 2002 and is presented each year by the National Runaway Safe Line, the federally recognized national crisis and communication system for youth aged 12 to 21 who have run away and are considering leaving home or are experiencing homelessness. Whereas runaway youth are often expelled from their home, have experienced trauma, struggle to meet basic needs, and are at increased danger of falling into high-risk situations, including human trafficking and long-term housing instability. And whereas knowing that every youth deserves to live in a safe and caring environment, Northwest Human Services and its host program, Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency and its Home Youth Services, Church at the Park and its Young Adult Services, Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance and its Youth Advisory Board, and the City of Salem and its Youth Development Services are working to raise awareness, provide support, and offer resources for young people in the community. And now, therefore, I, Chris Hoy, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim November 2023 as National Runaway Prevention Month and ask the community to observe this month with programs and activities that commit to protecting this vulnerable population of youth and recognize November 17th Light the Night event, dated this 13th day of November 2023.
I don't think I need to be the only one saying words, but yeah, as has already been expressed, there's quite a need in our community to serve and help, especially homeless youth and people who are experiencing being unhoused. So this proclamation speaks volumes about our community and what we care about, and I really appreciate that on behalf of Church of the Park.
Thank you. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, please. My name is Shantae, and I'm co-chair of the Youth and Young Adult Subcommittee of the Homeless Alliance. Just a few little facts of data. Last year in 2022, HOST, which is the Health Outreach Shelters and Transitions Program of Northwest Human Services, we served 119 homeless youth between ages of 18 and 24, providing over 4,000 services. This year, as of October numbers, we've served 363 individual young adults between 18 and 24, and we've already done 3,800 services. So the need is great, and I think as we are now coming out of a post-pandemic era, they're all starting to return. They're not all hiding away. And while the resiliency is very prominent as they're couch surfing and finding inside that resilience and tenacity to complete their own goals, with the major one being their high school diploma, we had over 22 phone calls last year from people that were receiving their diploma and had nowhere to live the next day. So we don't have the shelters or the housing for this, but the proclamation does bring awareness to all the resources and services that all of our community agency partners do offer.
On behalf of youth 11 to 18, that's who we serve, and I just want to echo what was shared. We have youth in our community who are being underserved, who are looking and seeking for programs to support them. Proclamations like this bring awareness, identify that there is a need for the community, and programs like ours that identify a positive connection that continue to find and fill gaps as they're needed, though it may be slight services or just basic needs, are really important in making sure that we're building protective factors where there are risk factors that that create future problems. So just identifying, and I want to thank you for your commitment to youth.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you. All right, and now our last one is Ruby Bridges, and we have a number of folks here to honor Ruby Bridges Day. Let's see. So if I can invite up Beth Schmidt, Mike Jaffe, Dr. Irvin Brown, Tanya Perfecto, Nubia Green, Magda Romero, Erica Monzo, Karina Valencia Cushman, Stephanie Russell, Tara Romine, and Dustin Purnell. Not everybody made it. Okay, well, that's all right. Let's line up here. Is this everybody? Great. All right. Whereas Ruby Bridges is an icon of the American Civil Rights Movement, who at the age of 6 years old in 1960 became the youngest member to integrate public schools in the American South, and whereas segregation continued to exist throughout the country despite the 1954 ruling in Brown versus Board of Education, barring any state laws allowing racial segregation in public schools, and whereas Ruby Bridges was the lone student of her group of African American students to integrate William Frantz Elementary School in the city of New Orleans on November 14, 1960, being escorted by 4 federal agents while bravely walking into school amongst protesters full of hatred and anger. Whereas the Ruby Bridges Foundation states Ruby believes the most important thing is uniting students. That is why this walk to school day is so important. It is a call to action. This day will be a day of dialogue, encouraging students to participate in discussions about racism, bullying, and youth activism on this day and throughout the school year. What better way to honor Ruby's legacy? Whereas the Salem Kaiser Safe Routes to Schools program encourages children to walk and roll to school to develop lifelong skills and independence in their community. And now, therefore, I, Chris Hoy, Mayor of the City of Salem, do hereby proclaim November 14th, 2023 as Ruby Bridges Day and ask the community to observe this day by participating in a local walk to school event and by committing to treating everyone with compassion and equality.
Thank you so much for having us. Dr. Irvin Brown and I worked really hard since last May to work this out. Thank you for having us and proclaiming this day. It's so special. I'd like to give a special shout out to Mrs. Nubia Green, who will go down in history as having the first Ruby Bridges Walk to School Day at Bush Elementary. And Erica Monzo, who's also going to have hers. We have 8 schools in Salem and Kaiser Public Schools tomorrow who are walking to school. Like, thousands of kids will walk to school in honor of Ruby Bridges tomorrow, and my heart is completely filled with joy. Tanya and Mike and I have worked really hard, and we're just happy to be a part of the community and involve everyone. North Salem and South Salem High School students will be walking with us, and this is just a marvelous time to share what Ruby Bridges did. That she was 6 years old. Think of the 6-year-olds that'll be walking tomorrow for Ruby Bridges. And they get to go out and walk and be with their friends and have fun, and what a better way. I know you enjoy it.
Absolutely.
I know you enjoy it, Mr. Staley. And I just am really appreciative of the community for embracing Safe Routes to School and everything that we're working toward right now. This is a fun time to get involved and take part with everyone and have a conversation about youth activism and everything we're doing here today. So anyway, I also want to give it to Dr. Brown if you'd like to say something. Cause Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we are on to public comment. Nobody signed up for public comment. We have a room full of people and nobody signed up. All right, Councilor Stapleton, the consent calendar.
Thank you. I move approval of the consent calendar with the exception of item 3.3B, pulled by Councilor Hoy.
Second.
Councilor, to your motion.
Thank you. The consent calendar tonight consists of items 3.1A, which is the October 23rd, 2023 draft City Council minutes, item 3.1B, the October 25th, 2023 draft City Council work session minutes, item 3.3A, the intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Transportation for implementation of the climate-friendly and equitable community scenario planning, item 3.3C, a claim settlement authorization, as well as item 3.3D. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion? Councilor Varney, did you have something on this?
Yes, I did. I just had a quick question because I know, thank you, Mayor Hoy. We are initiating the process with our transportation system master plan, and I was wondering, will this delay the timeline for us getting that transportation done, completed?
Distracted. Did 3.3B get pulled?
Yes. So your question is about, is it 3.3A? Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yes.
No worries. Do we have staff who could address whether this will impact the transportation system plan?
Yeah, I can certainly address that. Brian Martin,
Great.
Public Works Director. This will not delay the transportation system plan process. It is, in fact, part of the process to get our transportation system plan completed. So this is the first step in the process, and once we get through this, it'll lead to decisions with our TSP.
Thank you. Further discussion? All right, will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Varney.
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton.
Aye.
Counselor Nishioka.
Aye.
Counselor Phillips.
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez?
Aye.
Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Nordike?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye, motion passes. All right, we are on to public hearings. So item 4A.
The Salem City Council will now conduct a public hearing to consider the petitioner-initiated annexation of territory located at 7006 Sunnyside Road Southeast and 7102 Cains Place Southeast. The criteria applicable to the decision is SRC 260.010G1 A, B, C, and D. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing in person or in writing, or failure to provide statements or evidence with sufficient specificity to provide the parties and the City Council an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The hearing will begin with a staff presentation. First, the applicant is limited to 10 minutes. The applicable neighborhood association is limited to 5 minutes. Other interested parties are limited to 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right, and I see Ms. Anderson-Ogilvie has stepped up to the podium.
I have indeed. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. I'm here tonight to present this annexation request. As stated, the property is on Sunnyside Road in Cains Place Southeast. I first would like to request that the staff report, this presentation, and the comments that have been received be entered into the official record. Well, that's maybe a little hard to see, but the property is 48 acres approximately, and it's located all the way at the very tippy south part of the city way at the end. So on this map, the city limits is in the green outline, and the urban growth boundary is in purple. So this property is right at the edge of the urban growth boundary. And this is a 2023 aerial, so you can see the property is just to the west of Interstate 5. And to the east of Sabre Ridge subdivision, you can see Juniper Butte Avenue Southeast listed there. That property, or excuse me, that street gives access to the property. And then from the north, 20th Avenue Southeast also is stubbed into the property. You can see it's a fairly large property, 48 acres. Part of it's being farmed, has a house and some trees on it. Well, on the screen behind me, you can see the colors better than the one in the front. But the subject property has a comprehensive plan designation of developing residential, which just means that it's been designated to have future single-family development on it. The properties to the west in yellow are single-family, and to the north, multifamily on our comprehensive plan. Generally, the properties to the north are duplexes. There's a few fourplexes on each lot, and there's a mobile home park as well. And then the subject property, the applicant's not requesting a zone change. So under our code, it would come in designated as RA, which is residential agriculture, which is basically a single family zone. Although if you have a larger lot, it allows you to have farm uses. In the future, if it's subdivided, it would automatically turn into single family residential. The annexation approval criteria, first you have to determine that it's exempt from the voters. As long as all the property owners have signed the application, it is exempt, and they have all signed and requested the annexation. We have to determine if it's an orderly boundary. The property, like I said, is inside the urban growth boundary. It can be served by city services, which is another criteria. So we've had responses from development services, public works, police and fire that it can be served. It is currently served by a fire district, but it would be withdrawn from the district and the city fire department would serve it. And then the last criteria is if it's in the public interest. Generally, land inside the urban growth boundary is considered available for future development. That is where we plan to grow and have land for housing, for example. So this land has long been designated as future development land. We did receive testimony that was mailed out mostly today by the city recorder, commenting on a potential loss of trees. So one thing to note is that once it's annexed inside the city, our tree preservation ordinance will apply. I will note that Marion County does not have a tree preservation ordinance, so the trees will have more protection once they're annexed than they do today. Also concerns about loss of open space or impact on wildlife. Although the property is not generally developed today, it's not a city-owned property, it's not a park, it's just privately held property. that's not available for the public to use. And any impact on wildlife would be reviewed under future development plans, and of course they would have to comply with any federal and state regulations related to that. And then there was concern about the 2 access points that I showed on the slide before, which I think, yep, I show here again. So like I said, there's 2 local streets that are stubbed to the property. They're both developed to our local standards. The one to the north, I think, is actually a little bit wider than we would require these days. So they both have sidewalks, they both have on-street parking and allow 2-way travel. So both Juniper Butte and 20th Avenue. And they're the only access provided. So future development would access these streets as has long been planned because the streets were stubbed there to serve it. So the staff recommendation is that you approve the annexation, which would include applying the residential agriculture zoning, withdrawing it from the Salem Suburban Rural Fire Protection District, and forward to first reading. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. We do have one person signed up for testimony. We'll hear from that person, and then we'll go to staff questions. So Alex, Cadera?
The applicant is here first. Would the applicant go first? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The applicant hasn't signed up, they're welcome to go first.
Yes, the applicant would like to speak first.
Oh, they didn't sign up.
Yeah. Sorry, I think they just thought you would call them, so.
We'll get to you right after that. Thank you. You bet.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Jeremy Grenz. I'm representing the applicant. I work for Multitech Engineering. My office is at 1155 13th Street Southeast. Apologize for not signing up for testimony here. I'm going to be brief. Staff did a great job preparing the staff report, as always. There's not much that I'm going to speak to in terms of anything that we received for the written testimony. We did receive all of that. There's not really much that's appropriate to the applicable criteria. So with that, I'm going to save any rebuttal time and I answer any questions that you guys might have.
All right. Are we going to questions of the applicant now?
Yes.
Other questions for the applicant? Doesn't look like it. Thank you. And now we'll go to the public testimony. Alex, I'm sorry, say your last name for me.
Kavidra.
Alex Kavidra. Come on up to the microphone, and you have, right up here at the podium, and you have 3 minutes. Once the yellow light starts flashing, that means you have 1 minute left, and then when the red light comes on, your time is up. Please introduce yourself, your name and your address for the record.
Alex Kavidra, and I live 7066 Watson Creek Street Southeast. I actually bump up right against this potential development, and I do work from home, and I would be very saddened if we lost the trees. Some of these are incredibly tall, very robust area for wildlife. I do worry about the potential for development. I understand that the city is facing a lot of budgetary issues. There's limits on revenue, so how do you solve that? You build more houses, and then you can generate more property tax income. I drive all around Salem, and I see lots of developments going up all over the place. You have East Salem out near the soccer fields. You have Liberty. You have West Salem. You have downtown Salem. You have Battle Creek area near the Costco. I understand there is a demand for housing, and that housing does take a long time. You don't just buy land today and put a house on it tomorrow. I do worry about the potential for traffic, for the exposure to the hazards of a work site in an area where it is not very level, and we have lots of families. I do stress that unlimited housing and demolishing very pristine land is, I think, reckless, and I think is not a focus for the city and for the community. I will readily admit I am not in real estate. I do not understand or know the demands and supply of housing, but I could probably say that there is quite a bit of housing going up, and I would reckon to believe that the city of Salem is not struggling for people to come in, and I would suspect that the revenue and the budgetary issues that the city is facing would be of concern for the further growth of the city. But when I think of personally, I do not want to see additional development going in almost quite literally in my backyard, especially threatening such a beautiful area, one that actually drew me to the city of Salem. So I would hope that the city, whoever is in charge of that, would reconsider any plans or approvals for that development. I think that there's additional housing elsewhere that is already under construction or is much further along than this will be. So I would emphasize that with the relevant parties. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. All right, we will go now back to questions of staff. Do we have questions for staff? Councilor Gwynn.
So, Lisa, this is an annexation, right? I mean, it's the applicant would have to submit a subdivision plan and meet whatever criteria. So nothing's going to happen. I don't want to say anytime soon, but it'll be a while before that property is developed, correct?
Correct. So tonight, the question before the council is, should the property be brought into the city limits? If the answer is yes, it takes anywhere from a few months up to 6 months for that process to play out, to actually have it included in city limits. And then any future development would be subject to all of our standards and regulations that we have generally for subdivisions and development, which we would, get plans and review at that time and go through the public process for that.
And we're going to do our best to protect those trees, right?
Yes, so the tree preservation ordinance does apply. So lots of trees out there, I'm sure, meet the criteria for being significant today. And then when they come in for develop, which means they're already, once they're inside city limits, are protected. And then as they come in for development, we would be reviewing what they're proposing to remove and if they meet the criteria that we've laid out for when it's okay to remove significant trees.
Ms. Andrews-Ogilvie, if I understood you correctly, if the property owners yesterday had decided to cut down all these trees, they could have done that because it's in the county and they don't have a tree preservation code. But now that it's in the annexation process, they'll be subject to our tree preservation code, which will actually save a lot more of the trees than may have otherwise been saved. Is that accurate?
That's correct. The county does not have any trees that are protected.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for staff? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. So yes, Lisa, let's have you just review how we are, even though we are building, how we are still very short and underhoused. Could you speak to that?
Sure. So we did a housing needs analysis a few years ago, looked at our population, people's education, income, et cetera, and then we determined how many housing units we need over a 20-year period. So it's looked out to 2035. You'll recall through that we determined we had enough land for single family and not enough for multifamily. And through our Salem, we rezoned land to multifamily. So now under our studies, we have enough land inside the urban growth boundary. So that didn't just look at land in city limits. So this land was calculated to help meet our need for single family because it's in the urban growth boundary. Obviously, we can't assume that every parcel that was kind of large and vacant-ish will be developed in 20 years, right? People make individual decisions with their property. So we're still looking for the number of units that we need over the time period to be developed. And then obviously, people have property development rights. We get to control the zoning and the regulations that apply, but generally if somebody that's owning it today wants to sell it once they're inside the city limits, then they're, able to go through the development process that complies with their zoning.
Thank you. Mayor Hoy, may I have a follow-up question?
Sure.
Thank you. This would be directed to Josh. The comment made about needing revenue is something that I would like you to address, because we have heard you before talk about the cost of services oftentimes exceeds the revenue that is potentially received.
Good evening, Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer. You are correct. We don't know the specifics of this development. There's a lot of factors that go into it, but generally in the past when we see new development, it hasn't covered the cost of the new service that would be required at the current service level. Instead, the service has been reduced or expanded over more housing units.
Thank you.
And I'd like to follow up on my question, Ms. Anderson-Ogilvie. So when would this property be subject to our tree code? Is it as of now since the application's in, or would it be at a future date once the annexation is actually complete?
Not until the annexation is complete and it's inside city limits. Generally, though, if they were to do like a timber harvest and clear cut it, then we do have a 5-year moratorium on future development. So if the owner was like, oh, wow, I'm going to cut all the trees right now and sell the timber, we would get notification about that from the Department of Forestry, I believe. And then we would prohibit any future subdivision for 5 years. The applicant's not indicated that they're looking to cut the trees in the next few months. Their representatives are hearing what I have to say, so that would put a halt on the subdivision for 5 years. So I don't believe they'll be going that route.
I will ask that question when they have their chance for rebuttal, so you can hear from them directly. Thank you. Other questions for staff? All right, thank you. I would like to give the applicant a chance for rebuttal based on anything that you have heard here, and I would hope that you would address my question, or I can ask it again directly if that would be helpful. Could you hit that button there to turn the green light on for me? And I believe you have 7 minutes, is that correct? 5 minutes, sorry.
Yes, I can speak to your question about trees. At this point, the applicant, our client, has not spoken with us about any intention to start removing trees, harvesting, any of that at all. So more than likely he's going to authorize us to start doing some of the upfront topographic survey work, boundary work, site layout, geotechnical investigation here in the next couple months. So there is definitely some time before any activity is likely to start on that site. In terms of rebuttal, trees, as Ms. Anderson-Ogilvie mentioned, that there currently are no protections for trees as it sits in Marion County. And we're all well aware of the city's tree preservation ordinance, and we will definitely comply with that. In terms of the housing production and the current supply in Salem, I think most people here would say that there's a shortage and that more housing is needed. Beyond that, I think it's appropriate for most people that live inside city limits and inside urban growth boundaries to expect that other properties that are inside the urban growth boundaries to eventually be annexed into the city and eventually be developed. That's the ultimate goal for this applicant and the property. I can't speak to any specific time frame or timeline that they have for development, but that's about it.
Thank you. Are there any final questions for the applicant? Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going to close the public hearing and go to Councilor Stapleton.
I move staff recommendations.
Second.
Motion by Stapleton, second by Phillips. Discussion?
Yeah, I am actually really excited to see this. I know it's really hard to look at a piece of property with all those beautiful trees. I've never been out there, but I can only imagine how gorgeous it is. I am really thankful that it's being brought into the city so that we can protect some of those trees, even while we address the much needed housing crisis that we are all facing. And like they were just talking about, we have that urban growth boundary for a reason, and we need to develop right up to that edge and no further. And so this really hits all of those points of housing and climate change and all of those really important topics for this council that I know are so important to all of us. So I'm excited to see this moving forward and getting those trees protected.
Further discussion? Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to acknowledge the public testimony given by the neighbor to this property. I feel you and the fact that you would miss this view and the environment next to your property. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I don't know what can be done, but if the builder could consider what the current property owners are looking at on a daily basis and maybe bring that into their decision making as to what to remove and what not. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Stapleton.
Aye.
Counselor Nishioka.
Aye.
Counselor Phillips.
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Nordyke.
Aye.
Counselor Varney.
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, we will open a public hearing on item 4B.
The City Council will now hold a public hearing regarding case number CA 23-04, proposed code amendment to implement the state's climate-friendly and equitable communities parking lot requirements and allow single-room occupancy housing more broadly. The criteria applicable to the proposed amendment is SRC 110.085B 1 and 2. Testimony must be directed toward the identified criteria or other criteria the person believes to apply to the decision. The hearing will be conducted with a staff presentation, followed by other interested persons. Neighborhood associations are limited to 5 minutes per association for testimony, and individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see we have Eunice Kim up at the podium, attempting to work out the technical issues.
Good evening. I'm Eunice Kim, Long Range Planning Manager for the City of Salem, here subbing in for Austin Ross, who could not be here. I'm going to be presenting the staff report for Code Amendment case CA 2304. I'd like to include the staff report and presentation into the record. So the proposal before you tonight implements new requirements from the state. The first set of requirements is the climate-friendly and equitable rules, community rules that we've talked a little bit about already tonight, and the other one is House Bill 3395 that passed this legislative session. I'm going to start with the climate-friendly and equitable rules tonight. So just as a reminder, the climate-friendly and equitable communities rules were adopted by the state in 2022. They really focus on ensuring that cities like Salem make changes to how we do land use in transportation to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, as well as promote equity. The Climate-Friendly or Equitable Rules, or CFAC for short, is a very large package of different components that cities are required to implement. We are slowly making our way through them. For example, we eliminated all minimum parking requirements earlier this year. We've submitted to the state a study of our walkable mixed-use areas just a couple months ago, and we are kicking off our regional scenario planning now. All of this work aligns with the Our Salem project that updated our comprehensive plan and our climate action plan. So the proposed code amendment before you tonight implements two parts of the CFAC rules. The first part is a requirement for new large parking lots to essentially mitigate their climate impacts, if you think about like the urban heat island, for example. And it also allows park and rides to be converted from existing parking lots. These changes must be adopted by the end of the year. So the new requirements related to new parking lots only applies to new parking lots that are over a half an acre in size. And so for reference, that's about 70 spaces. Those parking lots can be all one lot, or they can be kind of multiple lots that serve one complex, if you think of like a shopping center. And they apply to any use, so it's a multifamily development, a commercial development, an industrial development. It's really based on the size of the parking lot. So the requirements the new requirements are for a developer who has a parking lot that's more than half acre to pick from one of these three options that you see on the screen. They're all related to climate mitigation. The first option is to install solar panels that have the capacity to generate at least a half a kilowatt per parking space. So if the new parking lot is 70 spaces, you would have to generate half a kilowatt for those each of those 70 spaces. The other option is to make a payment in lieu of that to the city. The payment is $1,500 per new parking space. That would be tied to inflation, so it would go up. That money we're proposing to come to the city would then be used for wind and solar projects related to the Salem Housing Authority projects, so that would go to help offset some of their costs. The third option is to provide 40% tree canopy coverage over the parking lot. So within 15 years of planting, a developer would have to show on their plans that 40% of their parking lot would be covered by tree canopy. This doesn't replace our existing tree preservation requirements or our landscaping requirements, so they're still in place. So if someone is planting trees to meet our existing requirements in a parking lot, you could count those, for example, towards the 40% tree canopy. And the rules also would allow flexibility. So if you want to do some parking lot tree canopy, but you want to do some solar panels, a developer could choose to mix and match. In addition to that first set of kind of choices, a developer would also have to do 30% tree canopy coverage, again, over the parking lot, or trees along their driveway. So if someone's already doing 40% tree canopy coverage, they don't need to do the second set of choices because they've already met that. But if someone, for example, decides we're just going to do solar panels on the top of our building, then they could say, okay, in addition, we're going to do trees along our driveway, or 30% tree canopy coverage. So there's some options and some flexibility, understanding that all sites are different, all needs are different. So this is just an example of the northern parking lot at Riverfront Park. We wanted to be able to show this would meet the 40% tree coverage. It goes above and beyond kind of what we require today, but it shows kind of what it would look like. And this is an example of the parking lot at Broadway Commons and the solar panels on top of the building. This development would meet the solar panel requirements and the trees along the driveways, even though they weren't required to. So we had some questions at the public hearing at the Planning Commission regarding kind of potential conflicts between trucks that are maneuvering, dropping off goods, and trees. And so we just wanted to kind of clarify that loading areas and storage areas are not required to meet these new tree canopy requirements. So the areas in purple would not be impacted. That's consistent with what we do today when we have requirements for trees and landscaping. The loading areas are not included. So the other part of the CFEC rules is to allow park and rides more broadly throughout Salem. The rules essentially say that we have to allow existing parking lots to convert to a park and ride. So it doesn't say that you have to allow new parking lots all over the city, but where there are existing parking lots, those have to be able to be converted. They would only be operated, leased, owned by chariots or a public transit, so it's not a private user couldn't come in and say, I'm going to use this for a park and ride. It's very much for a public transit agency. And last but not least, the proposed code amendment would allow single-room occupancies more broadly in Salem. This is a result of House Bill 3395 that again passed this year, and it goes into effect at the end of this year. So what that does is allow single-room occupancy, which is a situation where the rooms are individually rented and then they share a kitchen or a bath. It's generally a more affordable form of housing. And so there are some zones today, like our single family zone, where we don't allow this. This rule would say we have to allow up to 6 rooms in an SRO in that single family zone. The idea being that we should treat single family SROs like a form of housing when it comes to where it's allowed and how it's allowed. We did receive some comments, both in support and some questions. They're all attached in the packet. So staff recommendation is to advance Ordinance Bill 723 to second reading for the purpose of amending the Salem Revised Code to comply with the state's climate-friendly and equitable community rules related to parking lot regulations and make other changes related to housing. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. We do have one person signed up to testify, so we'll have Roger Bell come on up. Please introduce yourself and your address. You have 3 minutes. When the yellow light starts to flash, that means you have 1 minute left. When the red light comes on, that means your time's up.
All right. Hi, I'm Roger Bell. I live at 1386 Rees Hill Road, Southeast, here in Salem. I offer the following information for the City of Salem. City Council decision making regarding file 23387 version 1 referring to Ordinance Bill 723. Within the SRC Title 10, there are 6 different use classifications. Within those classifications, there are 19 categories. Within those categories, there are 73 uses. And I spent the better part of a few days reading through all this. There are 3 use types directly affected by the proposed code change. And I'm talking about the SRO. I'm not terribly excited about the downtown parking thing. Specific verbiage changes appear in sections 400, 035, group living. However, sections 430, household living, and 440, lodging, are also affected by the proposed change within certain chapters of the 500 series under the uses tables. You're getting a picture how confusing this can be if you've never read the SRCs. The current SRC Title 10 has no independent definition for single room occupancy in Chapter 111. However, within Chapter 400, Section 435, Group Living, Item A, Room and Board, there are provided characteristics. Subparagraph 1, examples, subparagraph 2, and exceptions, subparagraph 3, that render a change to the Chapter 111 definitions and Section 400 Group Living really unnecessary. That being said, the proposed code change does create a conflict with the original wording of SRC Title 10 in that instead of limiting single room occupancy to a maximum of 5 rooms, which it currently is now, 6 to 10 on conditional approval, the new proposed change would impose a minimum of 4 rooms and a 6-room maximum limit. Currently, we have in the 500 series SRC Title 10, we have 15 different use places that are allowing single room occupancy. We have 15 that do not because they don't allow residency in 10 of those 15. The ones that are going to be affected by this change to the SRO are your residential agriculture, residential single family, South Waterfront Mixed Use, Neighborhood Hub, and Mixed Use 1. Those are all going to get changed over to be SRO available. So what I'm asking you to do here is to send this back to the Planning Commission under your option 2 and have them break the parking thing apart from the code and then send it forward, because there needs to be a lot more discussion about this SRO.
Thank you for your testimony. All right, now it's time for questions of staff. Ms. Kim, if you want to come back up. Councilor Stapleton.
Thanks. I'll kick us off. So when we're talking about the parking lots, we have the 40% by 15 years coverage. What happens if that's not met, and who's monitoring that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we worked with our urban forester to come up with a list of trees that are small or large, and then roughly what the diameter would be at 15 years. So essentially, a developer would use that list to say, these are the trees that we're going to plant, and then we would give them credit for that at 15 years, what that diameter is.
Okay. And just hope that nothing happens, or that they're not cut down, or any of those other things. Okay.
I don't think you could cut them down.
Okay. Sounds good. Can I ask another follow-up? About the public testimony that we just heard, do you have any thoughts? That's a broad question.
Sure. We are trying to comply just with the state, the new law, and it does lay out in that law how we have to treat the number of SROs, or the rooms within the SROs, what we have to allow in the single family versus the other zones. So in the other zones, again, we're trying to treat SROs like housing, so it's really dependent on the density of that zone. So as an example, if a zone like our RM2 zone has a minimum density of 15 units per acre, the law says we have to allow the same amount of SROs. So we would have an SRO with 15 rooms per acre. That's laid out in the law, and we're simply implementing it. We don't have a choice in that.
Right.
And it is effective January 1 next year.
So this isn't anything that the Planning Commission can have any change in, or the council, because it's passed at the state level?
Correct.
Further questions? I guess I had one regarding the parking lots. We're talking about future parking lots, right? We're not talking about existing parking lots, is that correct?
New parking lots, correct.
Yeah, so all the ones that are existing today are not impacted. It's only if somebody wanted to develop a new parking lot, they would be subject to these rules?
Unless they were totally redeveloping it, like grinding down all the pavement down to the dirt, all of our parking requirements, not just these, would kick in.
Thank you. Councillor Varney.
Thank you. My question is in regards to the payment into the city's renewable energy fund. Where did that $1,500 amount come from? Was that from the OAR, or how was that established?
That comes straight from the OAR.
Okay, thank you.
And by OAR, you mean Oregon Administrative
I'm
Rule?
sorry. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Additional questions for staff? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. This is also on parking lots. You had mentioned that existing parking lots would need to convert to ride share?
Could.
Could.
They would be allowed to.
Oh, allowed to. All right, thank you.
Additional questions for staff? Councilor Gwynn.
I don't really have a question. I just have concerns, I guess, which were brought up by Mr. Bell, and I'm trying to, well, I'm trying to understand like what his concern was, and just to say, well, the state says we have to, so we have to, doesn't seem like an adequate answer. Because, I mean, aren't there lawsuits right now from other cities about this very CPEC thing? And so what happens if we don't move forward with this now?
Sure. The House Bill 3395 is the law that was passed this year that goes into effect next year, and that is separate from the climate-friendly and equitable rules that is being challenged by some cities. So the state law will kick in and become effective. So we could potentially not put it in our code, but it would still apply. So someone could still come in and say, I want to do an SRO with 6 rooms in the single family under state law. We are just trying to make it, put it into our code, which is much more clear for folks. I think generally through the Our Salem project, we did hear that there is a need for more housing, but also a range of housing types. So allowing SROs more broadly does also align with a lot of the community priorities around housing.
Sure.
So can you, I guess, give me an example? Does that mean, like, if I wanted to rent out a room in my home, then that this would be allowed as an SRO, and what would I have to do to be able to do that?
SROs are defined really pretty tightly. It's where there are individual rooms that are rented independently and lockable, and then have a shared facility. So it would be different than having a single family home and someone taking on a boarder, which we do allow, which is essentially renting out a room. So the whole property would be a single room occupancy. So it would be different than renting out one room.
Additional questions for staff? As I understand that law, Ms. Kim, currently you could have an SRO up to 5, and under these new rules, you could do 6 or more, up to.
Correct.
Yeah, up to, what's the max?
It depends on the density of the zones. So in commercial mixed-use zones, you could have more.
So we currently allow it, this just allows more.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Additional questions for staff? All right, I'll close the public hearing and go to Councilor Stapleton.
Yeah, I move staff recommendations.
Second.
Motion by Stapleton, second by Phillips.
Thanks. Yeah, this just seems like the next step in the plan as far as working with the state on adjusting our codes to find more creative ideas for housing options throughout the city, as well as tackling our climate goals with the parking lots.
Further discussion? Nobody? We're ready to vote? All right. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Nishioka?
Aye.
Counselor Phillips?
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn?
I am not going to vote on this.
You're abstaining?
Just as a reminder, our rules require you to vote, but you can make your own decision.
I don't like that.
I didn't write the rules.
I'm just so uncomfortable. Can you come back to me?
Sure.
Counselor Gonzalez?
Aye.
Counselor Hoy?
Aye.
Counselor Nordike?
Aye.
Counselor Varney?
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton?
Aye.
And Counselor Gwynn?
Reluctantly, aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. All right, on to item 4C. You thought that one was a challenge. Now this one.
The City Council will now hold a public hearing regarding establishing new solid waste collection rates and charges. The hearing will begin with the staff presentation, followed by public testimony. Individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right, and I see we have Mr. Zink up to the podium for our staff presentation. Yeah.
There it is.
I think we need the entertainment. Mr. Atchison, you're up. No. Well done on the dramatic pause.
I think I got it. All right. Good evening. My name is Ryan Zink. I am the franchise administrator for the City of Salem. This evening, during this public hearing, we'll be presenting the solid waste rates proposal for rates effective January 1st, 2024 and January 1st of 2025. I will start off with talking a little bit about our new Solid Waste Committee. So in July of this year, the new Solid Waste Committee, comprised of Councilors Stapleton, Gwynn, Nishioka, Varney, and Hoy as alternate, started meeting monthly to learn about our integrated solid waste system and the system that Salem works within. They participated in solid waste facility tours, so toured the Garden facility, Covanta, and what we call the MRF is the Marion Resource Recovery Facility, both in Brooks. They engaged in discussion with city staff, city consultant, Salem haulers, and Marion County staff to learn about solid waste system and the rate setting process. The rate increases described in tonight's presentation were presented to the committee on October 19th of 2023. The committee approved a motion to recommend to City Council the solid waste rates effective January 1st of 2024 and January 1st of 2025 as described in Resolution 2023-31. The next steps for the Solid Waste Committee, which will be meeting again on this Thursday, looking forward to it, will be to consider and recommend a council policy on solid waste, to advise staff during the implementation of the Oregon Recycling Modernization Act, and to advise city staff and city council and staff on emerging solid waste issues. One of the topics the committee covered in the city's authority, or is the city's authority and responsibility to provide solid waste services, and that local government has the primary responsibility for solid waste management in their jurisdictions. Additionally, we find that legislative intent is that a city or county may displace competition with a system of regulated collection service by issuing franchises, which may be exclusive if service areas are allocated. This is why each of the haulers has exclusive franchises to provide service within their designated areas. The city's code charges City Council with the responsibility of setting rates by service or by zone, and that Council shall consider certain factors when setting those rates, including a reasonable operating margin. The objective of the review process is to establish rates that balance the cost of the services to the customer with a sufficient operating margin to maintain operations. Return on revenue is a pre-tax margin of profit used to determine if this balance is being met. Factors including the current and projected revenues, allowable expenses, and equipment costs are used to calculate a sufficient and reasonable operating margin. Many jurisdictions that franchise their solid waste operations use return on revenue as an instrument for adjusting rates. Historically, the City of Salem has set rates to target a pre-tax revenue or pre-tax return of 10%, which is consistent with other jurisdictions. As an example, Beaverton at 9% and Gresham at 10% have both codified a targeted return on revenue for their solid waste providers. Rates are also set with the intent of not giving preference to or subsidizing one customer class over another. Salem maintains a practice of calculating and applying the cost of service to each line of service. The goal is to establish rates that are just, reasonable, and adequate. The adjustment factors used to project the cost of service include fuel, labor, medical insurance, disposal, vehicle depreciation, and general inflation. Fuel prices increased significantly over the last couple years, but stabilized in the latter half of 2022. As anticipated, fuel prices decreased in 2023 and are expected to end actually 10.1% lower than the previous year. Recent fuel projections, however, show an increase again in 2024, around 10%, but due to that uncertainty in the fuel market, we're projecting no change in 2025. Labor and medical insurance costs reflect collective bargaining agreements and recent experience. Overall disposal costs increased by 5.9% in 2023, but are expected to increase less than 1% over the next 2 years. The next slide, I have a breakout of the different disposals. We'll get into that. General inflation, which also applies to vehicle depreciation, saw a record high in 2022 of 8.2%, but has since started to come back down. General inflation is projected to decrease from 4.5% to 2.8% from 2023 to 2025. And the haulers are keeping close watch on delays in the supply chain, which impact the ability to order carts, containers, and vehicles crucial to operate their solid waste management. As I mentioned, I have a breakout of the disposal. So the combined increase, as described before, is 5.9%, increase for the next 3 years, or the current year is 5.9%, 0.7%, and 8.8% for 2023, 24, and 25. However, when we look at the breakdown, Covanta Marion, so that's the burner up in Brooks, so where much of the garbage in Marion County goes, that remains at $87.45 per ton. The disposal fee at Coffin Butte, the landfill in Corvallis, where garbage from Polk County is taken, increased to $1.50 per ton at 3.9% in the current year, 2023, and is expected to increase about 7% or $3 per ton each year in 2024 and 2025. Mixed organics, which include yard debris and food waste, increased $16 per ton in 2023 and is expecting modest increases over the next couple of years. Finally, commingled recycling, which is the recycle bin, curbside blue recycle bin, saw a major shift again in the market in 2023. The average cost per ton increased from about $73 in 2022 to a current average of $117 per ton in 2023, so resulting in over 60% increase. Again, because of that uncertainty, we're not projecting any changes over the next couple of years. By the way, I forgot to mention, this presentation is on all of your desks in case this is hard to read, and I realize that this one is probably going to be the hardest to read, so I apologize about that. But the graph gives us the information we need. So City Council is tasked, as you know, with considering a reasonable operating margin when setting solid waste rates. The operating margin is determined by calculating the pre-tax return on revenue, which is total revenues minus the allowable expenses divided again by total revenues. It's important to note that even though we target a 10%, it is not guaranteed, as you can see by the graph here. So the yellow is actual experience, where the orange line is that target of 10%. The return in 2023 is projected to be just above that target at 10.3%, but without a rate increase, the rising cost of providing solid waste services is projected to reduce the pre-tax return for 2024 and 25 to 7.6 and 5.3% respectively. This display further breaks down the projected returns by service zone and lines of business, and helps to explain why some lines of business would receive more or less of an increase than others. So I'll leave it here for just a second, let you digest that. Again, the slides in your packet as well. So in the Marion County portion of Salem, based on the factors presented in the report and the previous slides, an increase of 5.35% for roll cart services is recommended effective January 1st, 2024, with no increases for container or drop boxes for 2024. Effective January 1st of 2025, an increase of 3.35% for roll cart services, 2.85% for container, and 0.27% for drop box services is recommended. In the Polk County portion of Salem, based on the factors presented, an increase of 5.61% for roll cart services, 8.19% for container services, and 7.98% for drop box services is recommended effective January 1st, 2024. Effective January 1st of 2025, an increase of 3.79% for roll cart services, 4.33% for container services, and 4.79% for drop box services is recommended. The impact of these proposed increases on cart services in the Marion County portion is displayed on this slide. For example, the 35-gallon, which is what most, or I should say the highest subscribed service, would increase $3.70 on each bi-monthly bill in 2024. So most bills, residential bills, are every 2 months, so that bill would increase by $3.70. In 2025, that same service would increase $2.50 on each bi-monthly bill. Looking at the other lines of service in Marion County, again, no increases are proposed for 2024. However, the 2-yard container, which on the commercial side is the most subscribed service, would see an increase of $3.90 per month, and that's for a weekly pickup. There's or once a week or twice a week, 3 times a week, depending on the business that needs it. So that once a week pickup would increase by $3.90 a month. 20-yard drop box service would increase $1.30 per pickup in 2025. Looking at the Polk side, the 35-gallon would increase $3.30 on each bi-monthly bill in 2024, and in 2025 that same service would receive a $2.30 per bill increase. Again, looking at those other services in Marion County, those lines of service, the 2-yard in Polk County would again, collected once per week, would see an increase of $9.55 monthly in 2024 and $5.45 in 2025. The 20-yard drop box service would increase $18.05 per pickup in 24 and $11.70 per pickup in '25. So switching gears just a little bit, we've talked about our curbside service, switching to commercial medical waste. So Salem haulers do provide medical waste collection through a joint company called Marion Environmental Services, which collects medical waste from facilities throughout Salem, providing 3 levels of service: low volume, high volume, and hospital collection. Similar considerations as other solid waste services were used when determining these rates. As demonstrated in the top of this slide, an unexpected decrease in box counts coupled with higher than expected costs pushed the combined pre-tax return negative. The most significant impact moving forward, however, on the commercial medical rate is the rising cost of disposal starting in 2024. So on the bottom part of this slide, you see currently 2023 medical waste disposal at Covanta is $87.45. Next year that increases to $150 per ton, then $225 and $300 per ton by 2026. To offset the current negative returns, anticipated inflation factors, and increased disposal cost, a 28.8% increase overall in 2024 and 8.4% increase overall in 2025 are recommended. I do want to mention that for the curbside medical waste, for folks who have Sharps container at home, where they have that picked up by the haulers, these increases do not apply to that. We'll see actually more in line with the curbside garbage pickup increases there. So we'd be looking at just a little over 5% in 2024 and 3.35% in 2025 for those residential medical waste customers. So in summary, the proposed increases displayed on this slide, which include this curbside and your medical waste, which are included in Resolution 2023-31, are recommended for your approval tonight. A full list of the rates are in Exhibit A and B to the resolution. And I'm happy to answer any questions following public testimony.
Thank you. We have one person signed up for public testimony. We'll go to that and then we'll come back for questions. So we have Phil Carver. If you'd come on up, introduce yourself, your name and your address. Reminder, you have 3 minutes. When the yellow light starts to flash, that means you have 1 minute left. And when the red light comes on, your time's up. There you go.
Now it's on. Okay. My name is Phil Carver. I reside at 1007 Newport Drive, Southeast. And I'm speaking on behalf of 350 Salem. We want to first thank you, Mayor Hoy, for appointing a solid waste committee led by Councilor Stapleton. We're very excited about that, and we look forward to working with you in the years ahead. Regarding this specific hearing, the garbage rates, we advocated in the past for garbage rates that incentivize zero waste policies and practices in order to reduce greenhouse gases and other pollution. And we hope the committee will look at that as a policy when they meet next week. And just as a basic fact in terms of the relationship with greenhouse gases, the carbon dioxide from Covanta Marion is 135,000 metric tons per year. That's equivalent to about 35,000 cars. So trash burning does emit CO2. And that's the 20th largest facility in the state. The Coffin Butte emits 59,000 tons of CO2 and a lot of fugitive methane, which is far worse, 20 to 50 times worse than carbon dioxide. And methane then degrades into carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We urgently need everyone in Salem to reduce, reuse, and recycle instead of creating more trash to burn or bury. Last year we requested the 20-gallon every other rate option, and that was adopted, and we say thank you for that. Unfortunately, this option was not well promoted, and fewer than 400 households are taking advantage of this. So we'd like to see you require the haulers to promote this service, as regulated utilities, electric and gas, are required to promote their options. And we also hope the city will promote it on its website and out through all its communication mechanisms. And right now there's a $20 fee to exchange carts, and that's one of the reasons that's probably the low uptake. And that fee should be waived for all people who downsize their carts. We look forward to this issue, and we hope that the Solid Waste Committee will consider promoting the use of green cans for food waste, how the city can do that, communicate to people not to put their food in the trash, but to put it in the green can. And also requiring haulers to provide green and blue type cans or bins for multifamily housing. Right now they do not have that option, and we think that's really not good, especially with all this methane being generated by when food waste goes to the landfill. Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment. Thank you for the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Carver. Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Mr. Carver, so much for your testimony. I really appreciate you sharing it with us today and also in writing, because it gives me more opportunities to really process it. I was not aware that less than 400 residents had signed up for that service reduction you had mentioned. And I'd be genuinely curious, do you have any sense how many folks might sign up for that if it was better advertised? And I mean, how can we, if we haven't done the research on that, and if no one's done the research on that, then can we even calculate really what the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions is that we're missing on currently? I don't know if you have a crystal ball that you brought with you by chance.
I've been known to forecast as a professional economist, but I do not have another number, depending on how well it's promoted. But I'll give you a fact. The city of Portland has every week recycling pickup, and they have every other week trash pickup. The whole city of Portland. So if a whole city can do it, it seems like a lot of Salem residents could do it. It depends on your amount of trash, though. 20 gallons every other week is half as much as 20 gallons every week. And so most people have a 35-gallon every week. So I don't know how many people can reduce, but if they have the yard pickup, if they have the yard can, I would think they could get more of their food waste disposed and recycle more and so on. So I don't know, but I think it could, 400 seems really, really low to me.
In one question, another one if I may.
Sure.
Do you know when were we able to start adding all food to the mixed organics can? Because for years I've known to put my wheats and things like that, but for how long have we been able to put in other foods, breads, grains, tea leaves, dairy products, things like that, meats? I didn't think you could put meats in a mixed organic, so how long has that been around?
Many years, I don't know. About 10 years from Councilor Stapleton.
Yeah, so I can tell you it's not well known, so I will do my part to share with my neighborhood associations, because I don't think I'm the only one who didn't know that, because that's just been my family's understanding. We've been living in Salem for most of my life, so thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Carver.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go back to questions for staff. Mr. Zink, you are back, and I think I'm going to start with a question. I think a kind of a foundational question would be really helpful. I think we had some written comment. I've had some verbal comments from folks about this whole franchise system that we have here in this service areas. Are we alone in that? Is Salem the only city that does this model? Is that a common model? Can you just talk to us a little bit about the whole franchise system and why we're here tonight controlling private industry rates?
Absolutely. Happy to. So yeah, the franchise system is used statewide. As I indicated in some of the authority that's given to us by the state legislation, that's a very common model. Now, how they work within that can vary, but so for instance, we have our 6 haulers, and we go through an annual rate setting process. Other communities may have a 10-year contract, and they say, hey, we're going to do a CPI increase each year over those 10 years, and so they'll reevaluate every 10 years with possibly some stopgap language in the interim. Part of the reason, if you will, now I'm going on my understanding of, I wasn't here 40 years ago when a lot of this was, or even longer when a lot of this was established, but the benefit that I see for us in Salem is that it does mimic, if you will, that competitive competition that you would normally see in a free market. in that the city and really you, the council, after we review, like I said, the revenues that are expected, the allowable expenses, and I say allowable because there may be some expenses that we disallow, maybe a donation or different parts of their operation, to normalize and to bring those within acceptable and allowable expenses. That is what's calculated in terms of that return to ensure that citizens are only paying for the service that is needed and not more than that, but also allowing, again, that balance I talked about, allowing the haulers to have that sufficient operating margin to maintain their business.
And how do you know that those some costs are allowable and some are not? Do they just tell you and you trust them, or do you look at their books, or how do you figure out what the actual costs are?
Sure. So we get a consolidated. So from my perspective, I also look a little bit deeper, but we use a consultant. So Chris Bell, we've worked with him for 20 plus years. Last couple of years we used another consultant, but we're back with Chris this year. He'll look at, very deep into the haulers' financials. Typically each year we also will select 2 of the haulers and tie those back to additional sources, kind of like you would see in any other type of financial audit. So back to tax statements, back to payroll records, back to invoices, that type of thing. So we're assured that the costs that are being presented to us are proper costs. There's also tests of reasonableness. So for instance, the consultant, we look both among the 6 haulers, and there's actually some comparability to, there's 2 other haulers within Marion County, within Marion County, that there's comparability or comparison made. But looking to see if how those expenses compare between those haulers, along with 2 other providers throughout the state. That makes sense.
Thank you. Other questions for staff? Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you. Has the Solid Waste Committee discussed requiring haulers to provide the blue and green cans to multifamily housing?
I can't say that we've discussed it officially. I will say that recycling and yard waste, so the blue and the green, as you mentioned, are available to multifamily. Those rates are available, are in our rate schedule, but it's really based on the landlord and whether or not the property owner, the landlord managing that property, wants to provide that service to their tenants.
Okay, the next question I had, has the committee discussed creating a waiver for those who want to downsize garbage? Because I look at this $20 fee to exchange carts, and I see that as a real barrier for folks who already just barely have enough to pay their rent, pay their groceries, and pay for their essentials. And garbage service 100% is an essential. Has the committee discussed creating a waiver for those who want to downsize either to a smaller garbage can or to every other week service?
And before you answer that, Mr. Zink, if I could just add on to that, Councilor Varney and I and Councilor Gwynn were at the West Salem Neighborhood Association recently, and we heard from a resident who actually paid, they thought they paid like 3 times that much to have, that was the cost to downsize, and so they said it didn't make any financial sense for them to downsize, and that was just one person's report, and you and I discussed that, but I think, could you just make comment about that as well, if you could, when you're responding to Councilor Nordyke?
Mayor, could I actually take a stab at this really quick? I know that's weird, but I wanted to say, as the chair of this committee, kind of what we've been tackling so far, we've only met 4 times. And within that process, we knew as a committee that we had to handle this rate situation before we could get into setting the policy that we were wanting to work on. So we've really spent the 4 meetings understanding the solid waste stream. Is that the good word? System? I don't know.
Solid waste system.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you. And so that we're all on the same page, and then we've had to kind of handle this first. And we have been working really closely with 350 Salem. They've been coming to our meetings, providing public comment. And we are all really excited, I know, to get into the meat of really trying to get into that policy work. And so you're bringing up all the points that we are going to be tackling in the next couple of months. And I just wanted to give some reassurances to the council that we are really paying attention and wanting to handle those in the next, hopefully, 4 meetings or so. But anyway, I just wanted to say that before you answer all the questions.
Thank you. So I think the first part of your question, I hope, was handled or was addressed. The second part of your question, so as I described, or when we talked last week, if the price or the rate was charged was $60-some or more, 3 times that 20-something, that is concerning to me for that replacement. So, and that's something, if there's a particular issue or instance, I'm happy to follow up with the haulers and find out what was going on there, if there was a misunderstanding. So within the rate sheet, the current rate for 2023 for what's called a cart exchange, for a single cart is $20.20. For multiple carts, so if it's a complete in and out of all the carts, shouldn't be any more than $33.55. So if it was more than that, I'd like to address that. So if you have a name or someone, I can follow up with you afterwards.
Thank you.
The reason for that cost is, again, we're looking at cost recovery and ensuring that each service has a proper rate associated with it. And so this is the cost, the labor, truck and all that of coming out, doing the exchange, and then also taking it back, power washing it, cleaning it, and getting it ready for the next customer.
Thank you. I just would encourage our committee to take a close look at that and maybe come back with a policy once you've had time to really dig into that. I support the concept of maybe a one-time freebie for downsizing, something like that. So I just hope you guys will dig into that. Councilor Gwynn.
I was basically going the same. I had that question as well. And I think what the lady at the neighborhood association meeting said was, while the goal is for us to downsize to a smaller cart, what she said was it would take years for it to make sense financially for me to do that. And if you look at the numbers, I mean, she's absolutely right. So I would like to see how we can fix that to allow like a one-time, like the mayor said, a one-time freebie.
Further questions for staff? Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you. Yes, I hadn't finished my questions earlier. So in other words, no, we haven't looked at it, but we're going to, and I appreciate you saying that. The question I also had was just to make sure we're all on the same page. When I look at the Salem Revised Code, it says the council shall establish and adjust rates by service or by zone. And it goes on to say that we may adopt an order establishing or adjusting the rates provided by the franchisee. So in other words, we establish the rates. And I want to make sure that I understand that to mean if we wanted to establish, say, a waiver of the cart exchange for incentivizing downsizing garbage, we could under our code. Is that correct, city staff?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. I want to also just review that we have the every other week for the 20-gallon, and again, people wanting to exchange. We had also wanted to increase advertising of that opportunity. And so that is something we're asking all the haulers to do when they send out the annual calendars and review that information. So we are encouraging, making sure people are aware of that, and then also wanting to encourage the use of the green bin for their food waste, because food is so heavy. And if we can just compost that, it's so much better for the environment. So that was. I also had one question I wanted to ask Mr. Carver, if it would be all right to bring him up, or I could ask Mr. Zink and see if he could answer that.
That'd be great.
My question was about Covanta and burning, and the CO2 emissions, and what would be better than the methane that is Coffin Butte is experiencing. So I'm wondering if there's any way that we can figure out if we should burn more or if it should be going to the landfill, and what is better for the environment.
That might be a good topic for your committee.
And you don't have to answer that right now.
Counselor, that might be a good topic for your committee. This is really about rates, and I'm not
Okay.
sure we're going to get into the environmental impact
We'll
tonight.
discuss that in our meeting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Further questions for staff? Counselor Gonzalez.
The rate we're proposing, what I didn't see is the last couple years, like since for the last 5-6 years, what has the rate been? The increase in the rate, percentage-wise. Do we have any information handy?
I don't have that in this material here. Usually we're taking today and looking forward, so I apologize for not having that prepared. I can follow up with you afterwards if you'd like to, or provide that to the council.
Do you? Yeah, that'd be great. The any efficiencies that we're starting? Do we see any efficiencies with these haulers, these providers? Are they, thinking about in the future having electric trucks that do this? What are we just going to accept a percentage every year based on what they provide? When our voters this bipartisan vote last week, just so many people are worried about the rate. I think PGE is going up 15%. Northwest Natural, I think, was actually a reduction, but I didn't see how much. But I think, I'm just going to vote against it just because I think we need to push back. And, because I don't think we'll lose them unless you think this not passing, we'll start losing these providers.
So there's a couple questions in there. I'll try to address them. You mentioned electric trucks, electric vehicles. So that is something that we've started having conversations with the haulers. As an example, Republic Services has, I think nationwide, they have some goals of electrifying their fleet. Salem, City of Salem, and the service area here has been identified by Republic Services, their national headquarters, as a viable service area for electric fleet. That includes weather, geography, route size, that type of thing. So there's certainly some possibilities possibilities there. Talking with the rest of the haulers, they're asking as well, is this a priority of the city council for them moving forward? Is there, sometimes a couple years out in their purchase of vehicles, and so they're looking, do I need to start buying them now, or getting on the wait list because the city council is going to want me to buy them in 2 years? So yes, we are having those conversations. Now with 6 haulers, it's going to be interesting how we navigate that for each of those haulers. So again, that's one of those areas that we're looking at and getting some direction with the solid waste committee and the council policy. In terms of, if I understand correct, some of your other questions in terms of the affordability and future affordability of the solid waste rates, that is really part of my job and staff's job is to push back and say, is this, these expenses that they're presenting to us, or the information that they're presenting, is this appropriate in terms of that ask? And so we are continually pushing back and saying, I need justification on this, I need justification on that, and then that comparability with other jurisdictions to see if that is, again, an appropriate and allowable expense. So happy to dive into that a little bit more, but again, looking to the Solid Waste Committee, and again, that policy that will help, I think, guide even more staff as we're going through that process.
Further questions? Councilor Nordyke.
So I also notice under our revised code 47.015, one of the purposes of us even undertaking this effort is to promote recycling. And so we as a city, of course, can use our own resources to promote recycling, and we do. And I think we can always use good city social media and other communications to that effect, and I encourage our staff to do all those nice things. But what I'm not seeing when I skim through this section of the code, I'm not seeing anywhere in here where we can compel the garbage collectors to educate their folks or to say, hey, make sure you know you can do this with your mixed organics. Make sure you know that you can request a downsize and so on. I just want to make sure I understand. We can ask the garbage haulers, to Councilor Nishioka's point, and sure, we can, but I don't think we can compel them to educate people to incentivize them to reduce, can we? Not under our code, right?
So I don't know that we can compel them, if you will, but I will say that even without us having to force them, the haulers do a lot in terms, so I forgot the title of Kennedy, but I have some of the haulers sitting over here behind us. So the haulers have come together many, many years ago and have created the Mid-Valley Garbage Association, Garbage and Recycling Association. And so through that association, they have done a number of things in terms of the construction of facility, organization of how they do work together to create some efficiencies within our overall solid waste system. And part of that includes a single dedicated person to outreach for just as you're talking about in terms of the waste reduction, recycling, and that type of thing. So a part of that is going into schools, working with Marion, so taking a lot of the information that Marion County provides, and so Marion County is great as our waste shed manager to provide a lot of great information. That's kind of where that authority lies. But between the cities, both Salem, the Marion County, and the haulers, we coordinate quite a bit on what that communication and on that outreach.
Mr. Zink, doesn't the county take a portion of the tipping fee to provide that education and that all of that flow control and all the stuff that they do?
Yes.
So they are actually funded. That is actually their responsibility, kind of in this whole waste stream management, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm obviously not on the solid waste committee, and I'm not suggesting we should be compelling them to do anything that's not in the city code. I just want to know, the testimony we received tonight is that it's not being well advertised and that there is more that can be done. So I'm going off the testimony that I'm receiving from the concerned citizens tonight. So I would love to get to know better what our haulers are already doing. I would love to work with them and learn more about that. So I'll definitely reach out to them. But I appreciate that information. And if there's more that we can do as counselors to help just amplify that signal and share the information that the haulers are already sending out, the county is already sending out, and so on, I definitely want to help push that message further. Thank you.
If I could, along the wall over here are 4 handouts that talking about what can go in your yard debris, your mixed organics, what goes in your blue bin, what should be thrown away, along with the number of some food waste reduction, that type of thing. Pick one up, take it with you, make copies. I'll make copies. I'll send out. I'll send you the digital copy. You can. Well, I want to spread the word. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Thank you.
Councilor Varney.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Hoy. I had a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to clarify. I did talk to that Salem resident West Salem resident that brought up that issue at the meeting, and they said that they over kind of estimated that a little bit. There was a combination with carts, etc. And she also did follow up with that recycling, and they told her do omit the charge. Don't charge for the first time the cans are changed. And I don't know if that's for a particular period of time or for the whole life of the account. But that was the information that she got, so I wanted to follow up on that. It wasn't quite as big as it was pointed out at the meeting. Secondly, the committee, Solid Waste Committee, we have been talking about the need for greater education and incentives to reduce, and that's definitely something that we are going to keep working on. One of the things that was talked about that I wanted, and this is a question for you, Ryan, could you describe a little bit the option for the on-call can that can be picked up in regards to the cost, what that entails? Would that be able for people to reduce the amount of garbage that they're producing? And then the other thing I wanted to ask about, Brian, was that table on disposal. I'm really concerned that 2023, there was an increase of 23.2% for the yard debris food waste, and the increase of 60.3% for the commingled recycling. I guess it concerns me because we want people to put more of their food waste and yard debris in their green can, and we want them to do more commingled recycling, but the cost or the rate keeps going up. How are we going to balance these?
Let's see. So I'll take the great questions. Thank you. I'll take the on-call question first, if I may. So yes, there's an on-call service, so a 35-gallon on-call, which essentially means someone has a regular 35-gallon cart. When it's full, they can call their hauler, and the hauler will come out and pick it up on the day that would be their normal route day. That service does not, however, include the mixed organics cart or the recycle cart. So it's just a standalone service for that 35-gallon cart. It is for the current 2023 rate in Marion County is $13.25 per pickup. So every time it's picked up is $13.25. And actually that's the same rate for both Marion and Polk County. So every time it's picked up, it'll be $13.25. Now, customer can add kind of on an a la carte system, add mixed organics or add recycling as well. It works out with adding those. One pickup per month is about the same as a regular 35-gallon cart service that's picked up on a weekly basis. So it might make sense for some folks, may not make sense for others, but that is certainly an option. The questions on the disposal. So yes, the yard debris and food waste, that mixed organics cart. And this year we saw, yes, I think it was a $16 increase on that, which brought the cost of that service up to the market rate that is seen with other disposals throughout the state. So that So that is one of the services that goes through the MRF, the Marion Resource Recovery Facility. So all of the trucks that pick that up, take it there. That is reloaded and then taken down to the PRC, the Pacific Regional Compost down in Corvallis. Through the MRF's own analysis, we're realizing that was other services were subsidizing the mixed organics, and so it was right-sizing the cost of that within their own facility. And so that was a one-time adjustment that they needed to do within that for that service. And moving forward, we're seeing just small inflationary increases. On the commingled recycling, I wish I could say that there was a great answer for that, but we're really at the that's really up to the market for the end market for recycled goods, and so years ago, a number of years ago, the haulers would actually get paid per ton. There was a revenue stream. Now we're paying more for the recycling goods, or what goes into the blue bin, to sort it, clean it, separate it, and send it to end market. We're paying more for that than we are for what's called MSW, municipal solid waste, the garbage. So that's a decision that we as a community have made, that it's important for us to recycle that and to get those goods to those end markets, even though it costs us a little bit more.
Can I have a quick follow-up?
Sure.
Thank you. Well, one thing I wanted to say is isn't some of that increased cost for commingling recycling the fact that there's so many things in there that can't be recycled, or that people are putting things in the recycle bin that then have to go into the regular trash with its tipping fees and everything. I guess what I'm saying is if we were follow the rules a little bit better with our recycling, maybe that cost wouldn't be quite as high.
I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, so reducing the contamination within either the mixed organics or the commingled recycling would help reduce that cost moving forward.
Councillor Gwynn?
So I don't have a question, but what I wanted to say is I am on that subcommittee, and I didn't realize that our garbage could be so interesting. The MRF is incredible. And Covanta is too, but I mean, they basically burn it. But the links that they go to separate and to be able to reuse products is amazing. Yeah. So thank you for arranging all of those tours so that we really understand like what goes into what bin and things too. So thank you.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy, and thank you, Ryan, for leading us through this discussion tonight. I debated whether or not I'd say anything, and I feel like I do want to be on the record saying I support the concept of waiving at least once per, maybe lifetime or 2 to 3 years of maybe downsizing, so that you don't have to take 2 to 3 years to recoup your cost of downsizing. I want to make sure that I'm, definitely in support of that. Beyond that, this is a very complicated process, and it feels like a lot of our role in this is ceremonial because we're, dictated by the county and the state legislature on where our trash can go. So I think that the haulers have a right to, pay their employees, a livable wage, and we've got to get closer to that 10% target. And your slides without this show that we're going to be, at or below 8% of that margin. So I think that this just kind of gets us in line with inflation. I'm proud of the work that we've done as council to have the every other week option for the 20-gallon. In future, I would like to see us incentivize, further creating less trash. But I think that our role in this, I feel like we think it's big, but there's such bigger fish upstream in terms of the state effort to decrease, the packaging at the time of distribution in the large, stores and so forth. So I think that this is as good as we can do for now, but I look forward to additional work from the subcommittee. And I guess the last thing I just want to touch on is I feel that there's a little bit of a challenge in some of the way that our current policies are set up. At the beginning of your presentation, Ryan, you mentioned that we're only really allowed to or supposed to charge based on the cost of doing each line of service. And that makes it difficult. There seems tension there in creating a true incentive to create less garbage because the cost is just having the hookup. Like having the availability of somebody to come pick up the garbage has far more cost than the amount of garbage that's being generated. So I don't know how we'll get over that or what policies we'll need to make, to change in future, but that does seem like, a sticking point, for me at least in the short term, a challenge.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there further questions for staff? All right, I'll close the public hearing. Councillor Stapleton, do you have a motion?
Yes, I move staff recommendations.
I'll second that.
Motion by Stapleton, second by Nishioka. Councillor, to your motion.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a blast, Ryan. And to the haulers, to Marion County partners, everybody. I know our subcommittee has had so much fun getting to know you all, getting to interact with 350 as well on this topic. And you're missing out for not being on this subcommittee and for coming to these public meetings. They're fantastic. I really love getting into the details of this kind of unknown or unseen world that people don't pay attention to that just seamlessly happens within our community. But really behind the scenes are all these really hardworking people who care so much about our community, about the livelihoods of the people they employ, about the environment, about what the future holds for us as a community, and in this intersection of where all of this lands. So it really is a joy to be serving on this subcommittee. And of course, staff are fantastic. Ryan, thank you. So, moving forward, I think that although it's always challenging to raise rates, I think that we have to be realistic in understanding that the increase in costs to our haulers are real. Where we're at as far as losing the word that I want to use, but the balance of where we're kind of keeping their revenue in line, or their profit at the bottom line, is realistic, and they have to have some in order to be a thriving business. And I encourage that. I've worked in this field before. I worked for Valley Recycling and Disposal for years, and so I know this industry well and the people in it, and so I support their efforts and the work that they do in our community. I think that this is reasonable, even though times are challenging, to see those modest increases to really take care of those hard-hitting factors of increasing costs, not only in lots of different parts of this. So I will be supporting this measure, of course, and hope you all will as well.
Thank you, Councilor. I've often said that when we deal with garbage rates, that it's probably either the most frustrating or the second most frustrating part of being a city councilor, because we don't get to control anything except the rates. We don't get to control the tipping fees. We don't get to control where the garbage goes. We don't get to control the labor costs, including their health insurance and the fuel costs. We don't control anything except their rates. And so we really, in this system that we have a responsibility to make sure that we have our small businesses and large businesses that are involved in this in our city can make the profit that we have committed to. And so, yeah, it's frustrating, especially in right now. So, further discussion. Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you so much. I would like to see the committee really explore waiving fees for downsizing. And I know that wasn't as part of staff's recommendation, so you haven't had an opportunity to even talk about it with the haulers or know how much that might impact their bottom line and their ability to provide service and pay their employees. But I would really like to see an exploration of that and some data behind it so that I can make informed decisions about that. I see more opportunities for education. I see more opportunities for incentivizing more composting, more recycling, and more reduction. I would really like to see that the next time this comes before me for a vote. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with that. I also would like for this committee to maybe seek some consistency between the city and the county and how trash works. I happen to have a business in the county and my home is in the city, so I use both types of services and they are very different. So consistency would be great. I agree, Mr. Zink makes trash beautiful and interesting and fascinating, and if you haven't seen the Claw, you need to take a tour up there at the, it's a pretty incredible space. I also love garbage people. I really do, and they know that. I've said that already. I happen to go to 2 of those committee meetings. I'm just the alternate, but I happened to be there when we had to vote on whether or not to move this forward. And I voted no that day, and I'm going to vote no today simply because I think the voters, the people who live in Salem, are tired of having fees put upon them right this minute. So timing is everything. I'm absolutely sensitive to expenses, and I want the trash gone. I hate litter, and I just think timing is really important. So that's me. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilor Varney.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention we have been discussing waiving the fee for downsizing. But another thing to remember, the other side of that is if a family has children and they end up with diapers, they have to upsize. If you have something happen with a family member and you have increased medical needs or whatever, and there has to be an upsize, that's the other side of the equation too, and I want to make sure that we're fair. So how do we incentivize yet still not penalize? I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Phillips?
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn?
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez?
Nay.
Counselor Hoy?
Nay.
Counselor Nordyke?
Aye.
Counselor Varney?
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton?
Aye.
Counselor Nishioka?
Aye.
Mayor Hoy?
Aye. Motion passes. Let's take a 5-minute break. Mm-hmm. All right. Looks like there are 5 of us here. 6, 7. Oh, we're good in good shape. All right. On to item 4D, and this is a continued public hearing. So I don't know if we need the announcement again or if I should. Okay. So this is a continued public hearing on the proposed amendment to the Salem Revised Code regarding the sign code. So we're just hitting all the highlights tonight on all the public hearings. We're just getting them all out of the way tonight, all the fun ones. So we have Mr. Panko here.
Hello, good evening, Mayor Hoy and members of council. I don't have a presentation for you, but a quick recap. We did have a public hearing on October 23rd. We had several questions that were raised during that hearing. City staff provided a Q&A to some of the questions that were raised, which are included in the agenda tonight. Our comment period was also extended, and we did receive 3 comments today before tonight's hearing. So one comment was regarding fences along construction sites, on construction fencing, banners on them. And staff, we don't have any changes proposed to that aspect of the sign code. So currently, temporary banners, they're only allowed to be hung on buildings. They can't be hung on fencing of any type. And then we received 2 requests to postpone any action on the sign code because it may interfere with some projects that are in the works. So real quick, if council takes action tonight and advances the sign code to first reading, the next action after that would be second reading, and 30 days from second reading is when the code would be effective. So any decision tonight, I mean, there wouldn't be immediate changes to the sign code. And those changes would only apply to permits that are received after those changes become effective. It doesn't impact anything that's in the works right now. And just a reminder to staff, we have been working on the sign code amendment for about 1.5 years. We've had work sessions with the Planning Commission in spring of 2022. We've conducted outreach. We've notified property owners. So we are available to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have questions for staff? Are we ready for a motion? I'm getting no looks, blank looks, nothing. I gotta have something. Do we want to talk about it or do we just want to vote?
I don't have any questions. I'm ready to vote, but open for whatever.
I will close the hearing then. Going once? Yeah, we'll close the public hearing. That's progress right there. Okay, Councilor Phillips, do you have a motion?
Okay, Councilor Phillips, Ward 3.
Yes.
I move to advance ordinance bill number 16-23 to first reading and to increase the maximum allowance for signs attached to or painted on the interior of a window on building facades within 30 feet of a public street from 20% to 50%, and clarify that the limitation shall apply to the total window area of a building facade rather than per window.
Second.
Councilor, to your motion?
So to my motion, basically this is a nominal change to what was presented to us last time we met during a public hearing. This minor amendment, changing it from 20 to 50%, was after meeting with Lisa and Aaron in a small group meeting. I was pretty redundant the last time on this specific issue. Specifically, I learned, that this is new. We don't currently have these restrictions placed on windows. And one of the reasons why I think it seems opportune to do this is we've got some new, code and emphasis on, mixed-use development in our community that would create, walkable, friendly infrastructure to facilitate, encouraging people to take, active forms of transportation. But I felt that 20% was too restrictive. Since this is a new area of regulation, I think it's just, simple is better. So I think doing 50%, which is kind of an easier, half the window surface area, is just more simple. And it should be more flexible for businesses in our community. I also think that the prospect of regulating each individual window is more challenging. So this overall, I'm starting from a position of what I view as more maximum flexibility than being so prescriptive. Beyond that, I think that a lot of good work has gone in to staff over the last year and a half. I'm broadly supportive of making changes. And I just wanted to kick us off with that one thing that hung me up last time. And I think we got to a good place with the help of staff. I do want to say just one last thing. I did confirm with staff that there's not really an accepted, industry or section standard. So in large sense, we're just making an educated guess, and there was no actual pushback to this, nominal change within the kickoff of the amendment we discussed last time. So going from 20 to 50%, there's not a normal.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion? Councilor Gwynn.
I'm just going to say that makes me very happy, and I can now support this. So thank you.
Excellent. Councilor Nishioka, did I see a hand? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Hoy. I have a friendly amendment. I move to amend the motion to advance ordinance bill number 1623 to first readings and to direct staff to bring back information at a later date exploring the implementation of a cap on the maximum number of outdoor advertising signs permitted in the city limits and how to make additional changes to address light pollution.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor. Before I ask you to speak to your amendment, I'm going to throw it over to our city attorney.
Dan Atchison, City Attorney. I just want to clarify that your amendment to the motion includes all the elements of the motion that Councilor Phillips made.
It does.
Thank you, Councilor. To your amendment.
Thank you. The proposed code amendment includes billboard limitations, but I would like staff to explore the concept of an overall cap on the number of billboards in the city. I'd like to see the city reduce light pollution from signs if possible, or at least reduce them down, maybe have standards at nighttime. The illumination needs to decrease at a certain time, like midnight or something. And I would also like to explore further reducing the brightness and restricting the conversion of billboards that are not LED billboards to electric displays, limiting hours of illumination, that was a tongue twister, for all electronic display signs, and providing a sunset clause that will require all signs to comply with illumination standards within a set period. It will take the staff time to review all of this, and they would bring it back at a later date.
Thank you, Councilor. Just to clarify for everyone, right now we're discussing, we've sort of paused discussion on Councilor Phillips' motion, and we're just discussing this potential amendment. Then we'll vote on the potential amendment. Then we'll go back to the discussion of the original motion. Just to clarify, I have a question, Councilor, on your amendment. You're not asking to amend the code. You're asking for staff to bring back information so we can consider a future code amendment. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you. I thought I heard that, but I just wanted to make sure because that's kind of a key difference.
A key difference, yes. Yeah. I would like them to study this and bring it back to us later.
Great. Thank you. Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you, Councilor Nishioka, for bringing this suggestion. Can you give me an example? What is the problem that you are seeking to address, and what might a potential amendment look like? I think I know where you're going with this, but rather than me trying to interpret it, can you just give me an example of the problem and the solution that you're in search of with this?
Thank you. Yes, what I want to do is have them look into a cap that would not allow us to have billboard after billboard after billboard as you're driving down Kubler or Commercial, and to sort of decrease the intensity of the lights, especially as it gets dark at night, wanting to try to have a darker skies city so that migrating animals don't get caught up in all of the uplighting. Basically, I just feel that if we have too many billboards, it starts to look a little unpleasant. So I just wanted exploration on limits, and then for those that are LED lights, some request to improve how bright, like reduce them to not be so bright.
Further discussion, Councilor Phillips.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy, and thank you, Councilor Nishioka, for this additional request from staff. I am interested in learning more about a potential cap on all billboards. I need probably more time and information to really have a sense of what that's going to look like. But it is my strong belief that we really should do more when it comes to light pollution. I think that there are definitely environmental, or my understanding of the available data and understanding is that there is definitely environmental advantages to having more strict regulation in terms of light pollution, but also just health benefits for the community at large. Sleeping when it's dark is just better and healthier, based on my understanding of the available data and science. So that's the part of your proposal that I'm most excited about, and that's why I intend to support it.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gonzalez.
Councilor Nishioka, can you define billboards? I just want to make sure to know what kind of signage we're talking about. Like, what are we talking about?
Well, I'm not sure I have the exact definition, but the billboards would be the ones that are on the very tall posts that are quite large, and they have, I'd say static, where there's no illumination, and then there's ones that have the changes and they illuminate. So they're very tall. And they're generally on property that has nothing to do with the building. It's not in front of a building. It's been rented property, and it could be advertising something that's across town.
Okay. So it's not signage for a plaza or a business. You're talking independent billboard, and I see.
Did that answer your question sufficiently? I think Ms. Anderson-Ogilvie may have some more information if you're interested, but if that got you to your answer, then we don't need to.
Lisa Anderson-Ogilvie, your planning administrator. I was nodding yes. So it's not signage for the business, although they could rent a space on the billboard. In our code, we actually call them outdoor advertising signs, and so they are signage there, and then they rent out the space, which normally, if you were to install a sign on your business, you were prohibited from then having signage for other off-site businesses unless you're approved for a billboard. Yeah.
Great. Further discussion on this amendment. Councilor Hoy.
Just briefly, technology changes and we get bigger and brighter lights all the time, and I'm really thankful for you bringing that forward because I find it a huge distraction when driving at night. I don't know if it's pre-cataracts or what the deal is, but it's a lot. It's hard, and it's very distracting. So I hope we can deal with that and curb the issue for safety reasons as well.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion on the proposed amendment to the motion. Councilor Gwynn.
I just want to clarify that it comes back to us for a decision. We're not making a decision on billboards tonight.
Correct. This is just this amendment just directs staff to do some research, bring information back. It doesn't change. It doesn't amend any codes whatsoever. This proposed amendment to the motion. Further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll on the proposed amendment to the motion?
Councilor Gwynn.
Aye.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Hoy.
Aye.
Councilor Nordijk. Aye. Councilor Varney.
Aye.
Councilor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councilor Nishioka.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips.
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. So we now have a consolidated motion that includes Councilor Phillips' original motion and the amendment from Councilor Nishioka. And so we can go back to debating that full motion, or we can just go to a vote, whichever you're ready to do. Looks like we're ready for a vote. I'm not seeing any objections, so will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Nordike.
Aye.
Counselor Varney.
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton.
Aye.
Counselor Nishioka.
Aye.
Counselor Phillips.
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn.
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. Great work, staff. Thank you. That's all. I know this is a culmination of a lot of hours of work, so thank you. All right, we are now on to special orders of business, and that takes us to 5A. And I don't know who is, Mr. Martin, are you presenting that?
I'm going to go ahead and kick it off, Mr.
Great.
Mayor. All right. Good evening, Mayor Hoy, City Councilors, Brian Martin, Public Works Director. And tonight we're going to introduce the topic of forever chemicals, also known as PFAS, which stands for perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Industries began using these substances in the 1940s. They are not new. Today, forever chemicals are frequently making news headlines because it has been determined that lifetime exposure to them may lead to cancer and other health effects. Additionally, the Environmental Protection Agency has developed proposed rules for drinking water that will take effect in 2026. The City of Salem, like many other water providers across the country, has tested our drinking water for forever chemicals. We're happy to report that forever chemicals have not been detected in Salem's drinking water at or above EPA minimum reporting levels. Salem's drinking water remains safe to drink. I want to repeat that. Salem's drinking water remains safe to drink. We are extremely fortunate that we have a pristine drinking water source. Many other providers, particularly in the Midwest and on the East Coast, are not so fortunate, as they have found forever chemicals in their drinking water at levels higher than the proposed EPA rule. We're at the very beginning of the national rulemaking process for forever chemicals, and this issue will be discussed for decades to come. We're not asking council to take any actions tonight. We're providing preliminary information. I want to let you know that we will be periodically discussing forever chemicals for years to come. Tonight we have Jude Grounds, Vice President of Corello Engineering, at the podium. He's going to tell us about forever chemicals and where they come from, why we are concerned about them, what regulations are emerging, what Salem has found with our testing, and he's also going to discuss our plan to monitor our utility systems in the future. We also have Nitin Joshi, our Environmental Services and Technology Manager, Lacey Gores-Priest, our Water Quality and Treatment Supervisor, and Zhu Zhao, our Wastewater Treatment Manager, here to answer any questions you may have after the presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jude.
Welcome back to council chambers after under what I would call better circumstances than last time.
Thank you very much. My name is Jude Grounds. I live at 71490 Near City Road in Rainier, Oregon. Here tonight to give the council an update on PFAS status here in the city. Beginning with what are PFAS? A little background. Per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, are human-made fluorinated chemicals widely used in the industry because they have really unique properties that we've found very convenient for our manufacturing and for our everyday life, including stain repellent, water resistance, non-stick, and therefore we find them in everyday uses in our non-stick cookware, stain repellent carpet, fast food containers, and beyond. PFAS is really a family of compounds that's huge, nearly 15,000 compounds, and they really start from the primary trunk of PFAS, but have branched out to different molecules, double-sided molecules, branch molecules. But really, when we talk about PFAS and our understanding of health impacts, we're really looking at the original compounds because they're most concentrated and most ubiquitous throughout our environment. PFAS move through our water cycle, from our air to our water, to our soils, in our streams. And they're really everywhere, and we've detected them on top of Mount Everest and as far north as the North Pole. Why do we care about PFAS compounds? Because they're everywhere, because we're surrounded by them. We get exposed to PFAS in a variety of ways. This lifetime exposure to PFAS can be harmful to human health, can increase risk of various cancers, can decrease birth rate, and other examples. So we'd like to just summarize the current status of PFAS, first in the drinking water, and then we'll move to wastewater, the liquid stream and then the biosolid stream, and talk a little bit about what the city's doing. So focus on drinking water. The city expects to meet all current and future drinking water regulations related to PFAS, as Mr. Martin suggested. US EPA is currently working through what we call the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. Kind of casts a wide net to understand the impacts, the concentrations, the health effects of PFAS across the nation as they develop a national maximum contaminant level for PFAS. Salem is supporting that and has been sampling for 29 PFAS compounds. The current draft rule focuses on 6 PFAS compounds, but based on the data that's been collected to date, there have been no detections of PFAS above the EPA reporting limits. And it says 3 rounds in the slide there, but we just received the final round of samples last night. So the city's website has been updated today. So really, it doesn't come as any surprise because the city of Salem's drinking water comes from the North Salem watershed. It's very pristine, as you all know. It doesn't really have the types of industrial sources that are typically responsible for PFAS contamination. Salem's PFAS sampling efforts are ongoing. The city staff will be back to update the council and share updated results as the results come in, but we'll continue to sample to follow the finalized drinking water regulations when that's promulgated later this year, as well as testing for PFAS in the aquifer storage and recovery system. That's the underground drinking water storage reservoir that takes treated water and stores it in the ground and is used during the summer to offset demands from Guerin Island. So that testing will start this month. So moving from drinking water now to the wastewater stream. Wastewater treatment plants receive PFAS from a number of sources. We call it the influent to the wastewater treatment plant. What comes into the plant includes domestic sources like our domestic waste from our houses, but also industrial sources, waste from industries, but landfill leachate as well, which is the liquid streams that get collected throughout the under drains of landfills and gets collected into a stream. That liquid stream is also introduced into the wastewater treatment plant. Once that treatment waste is processed, the treated water, or the effluent, which is discharged for the city of Salem into the Willamette River. We'll talk a little bit about concentrations in the effluent as well. Next, we'll pivot to the biosolids, which is the treated solid stream coming from the wastewater treatment plant. So PFAS are virtually everywhere in wastewater effluents across the nation. This table summarizes a variety of PFAS compounds on the left, as well as a number of water treatment plants and the detection frequency for these compounds. For wastewater liquid stream, I'm going to focus on PFOA, that top line there, which is very ubiquitous in wastewater streams, just as an example of the types of contaminants that we see in wastewater. But I just want to remind everybody that wastewater treatment plants do not create PFAS. They are the recipients of this, and they receive it through the inlet from pollutions. So there is no federal regulation for PFAS on the wastewater side right now. However, the EPA has published some non-enforceable recommendations to monitor PFAS in the wastewater effluent. And we summarize these recommendations in these bullets, but briefly, it's just about going out and doing what the city's always done. Look at industrial users, look at potential contaminant sources, and try to optimize and minimize the contaminants from those sources. Oregon DEQ has not adopted those recommendations, so there aren't any Oregon requirements. But there are some states in the nation that have adopted those requirements. We're going to share with you just a high-level overview of some of the preliminary data that has been collected on PFAS on the wastewater stream. The next slide is going to show a map of the United States and some areas where states actually have moved forward with state action levels on PFAS monitoring and treatment requirements ahead of the national rule. And really, these are areas typically in the Northeast that are more susceptible. They've been using these compounds in their industries for years and are registering concentrations that are much higher than we see here in the Pacific Northwest. So I don't want to drag you through all the details of these requirements. Rather, we'll use these as bookends to see kind of where the federal rules might land, and a good way to kind of a lens through which to look at the data that the city has collected to date. Again, we're going to focus on PFOA, which is one of the PFAS compounds. It's an older compound that will likely be regulated. And this graph shows in the dark gray line the national mean for wastewater treatment plants effluent, the average for wastewater treatment plant effluent treated water, relative to Salem, which is the green line. So you can see Salem's wastewater has about, on average, 15% of the PFAS that an average wastewater treatment plant in the nation would have. Also below, in orange on the left is the New York limit, and in red on the right is the Michigan limit. These are the bookends for the state rules that have been passed. So you can kind of see somewhere in there, maybe on either end, is where the national requirement is going to land, and where that ultimately lands will determine whether or not City of Salem and a lot of other wastewater treatment plants will require additional treatment or mitigation of influent or source control for those PFAS contaminants. Now, I shared with you the average. This graph is very similar. The previous data is kind of screened back. What's shown above is not the average, but the results of individual samples. And you can see, depending on the time of year, we can see different levels of PFOA, in this case, in our influent at the wastewater treatment plant. Testings in February, May, and August show varying levels of PFOA measurements. The city's also taken the EPA recommendation seriously. They've gone out and they've looked at what potential industrial streams could be contributing to PFAS in the treatment influent, and landfill leachate is one of those sources that can potentially have PFAS in them. So they did an experiment testing the influent, what's coming into the wastewater treatment plant, with all the sources combined and blended, including leachate. And then they segregated leachate, did not allow leachate to mingle with the other wastewaters. And they looked at the varying concentrations. What they found was that although PFOA was though leachate was a contributor of PFOA, it wasn't the only source. So about 10% of it in this limited data set was a contribution of PFOA from the landfill leachate. They've also wanted to understand the impacts that the Willow Lake plant might have on PFAS and PFOA concentrations in the Willamette River. To do that, they've been sampling upstream and downstream of the Willow Lake discharge. They've tested for over 40 PFAS compounds. Many of them were non-detects, but in compounds PFOA that we've been following here for the liquid stream, there have been detects, and shown in this graph are the concentrations there. And you can see on the left is the upstream concentration, on the right is the downstream concentration, and they're really indistinguishable. So it can be said that the Willow Lake plant is not contributing to PFOA levels in the Willamette River based on this limited data set. How high are these concentrations relative to national potential regulatory limits? Well, that most stringent limit, the New York limit that we showed in the earlier slide, is shown at the top there, that 6.7 parts per trillion. You can see where the background levels in the Willamette River rank relative to that. And we show that because there aren't, again, any current regulations in the Willamette River. So just a quick summary of the wastewater PFAS sampling efforts. Salem began testing for PFAS in the wastewater in 2023. Early results suggest that PFAS levels are on par with national averages. We are detecting them, although I would say at about 15% on average, the national average. But more sampling is going to be needed to understand the prevalence of those PFAS, as well as the kind of seasonal variability associated with those concentrations. Sampling efforts upstream and downstream of Salem's Willow Lake water pollution control facility suggest that Salem has not contributed significantly to PFAS levels in the Willamette River based on the data that we've collected. Again, additional data will continue to be collected. Sampling leachate streams show that landfill leachate is a source of PFAS. However, it's not the only source, and that amount varies, again, seasonally. So moving now to the solid product from the wastewater treatment plant, the biosolids we call it. Again, this is just that flow diagram coming out of the treatment plant. The solid stream is what we're focused on here. And very similar to PFAS in the liquid stream, it's pretty ubiquitous. Of the samples that were taken across the country, we see PFAS in the biosolids pretty consistently. We'll focus on PFOA, a different compound here, to share some results, but just to get a little sense of how concentration of biosolids in the, or concentration of PFAS in the biosolids relate to everyday products in our lives. If you focus on the bottom x-axis, this is PFOA and PFOS in parts per billion. And the very bottom bars are for the biosolids, the average for PFAS concentrations in California's biosolids. And you can compare that to some of the other data points in here: carpet in the daycare centers, and dust in daycare centers, and beef and trout and chicken and oysters and other things that we consume on a daily basis. Just for perspective. Now again, there aren't any federal rules associated with this, but those same states have passed requirements on the biosolids, and we'll use those again as a kind of a baseline to see where the national rules, when they are promulgated, will likely fall. And this graph shows a pretty consistent result for the city. The national average, in this case for PFOS, is an order of magnitude higher than what we're seeing for the same compound in Salem's biosolids. And also you see there in the dashed line is Michigan's interim PFOS concentration. So where that rule might land on the national level. So that's it for the data summary. What else is Salem doing? City has worked diligently on a website that has been up and running for some time now. It summarizes a lot of this background information, links to different resources across the country, helpful information about what we can do as consumers and Salem citizens. The city's also been looking at a draft communication and action plan, which really looks at near-term actions over the next couple of years through 2025 and focuses those actions in 6 key areas: communications, additional PFAS monitoring, source management, and the kinds of things they've been doing, looking at industrial streams, capital needs planning, so making sure there is money, if needed, in the coffers to pay for mitigation measures, partnerships, as well as advocacy, to join with other agencies to really advocate for science-based decisions and funding for PFAS mitigation. So key takeaways: Salem's drinking water remains safe. There have been no detection of PFAS above the EPA reporting level in Salem's drinking water, and the new federal PFAS regulations for drinking water are coming, but based on the current rule and the data that has been collected over the last year, Salem expects to meet all those future requirements without modifications to the existing treatment system. The drinking water treatment plant can be adjusted to accommodate future PFAS treatment if that's ever needed, though again not anticipated. There are no federal or state level regulations for PFAS in wastewater or biosolids, but the City of Salem is taking a proactive approach to prepare for any changes to safeguard public health. And again, those concentrations that have been tested to date on the average are much lower than what we see on the national average. And finally, sharing information. City has posted a website, but really this is a long, ongoing conversation. We are just starting to understand this. This early data are just high-level trends, but you all will receive updates from city staff on results of additional measurements, as well as the evolution of the national regulations moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go now to questions. I guess I want to start off with a question for Mr. Martin, and this is a question that we discussed in our small groups, but it's regarding the leachate. And I understand that we have a practice of introducing leachate into our wastewater system from Coffin Butte, because that's part of our responsibility, I think, because we contribute a lot of the trash that goes there. But I think we also import it from out of state. And I'm wondering, what the status of that is. I expressed my desire to not have that happen anymore, and I'm just wondering where that's at, and just where we're at with that.
Sure, absolutely, Mr. Mayor. So we do accept the leachate from Coffin Butte, and there are 2 other landfills that we accept leachate from. Well, I should caveat. There are other landfills that have chosen us to be an accepting source of leachate. So we have not gone out and actively pursued companies to, hey, come here. It's just they've chosen us because we accept it. So there is a landfill from Washington that sometimes delivers leachate to the city of Salem, and there's also one from the Portland area. We've been accepting leachate for about 11 years, and we have not made any decisions on cutting anyone off or making significant rule changes yet. We wanted to get through the data to see what we really had in front of us before we made any of those decisions. But if the city wanted to make some decisions going forward and try and make it more of a regional acceptance, that is something we could look at doing. We just have not done it yet.
Thank you. Further questions for staff? Councilor well, let's go to Mr. Staley real quickly. Okay, we'll go to Councilor Gonzalez first.
Thanks, boss. Thanks. I think it was a wastewater you mentioned. I think it was in New York, Michigan. They had a 6.7 level, 66 over here. Can you tell us what that means? For example, when you talk about, the only thing I could compare it to is when you compare foreign currency. Somewhere else see this thing is 50,000 something and then 150, but we can't grasp what that means in dollars. So these numbers, what do they mean, and where do you think they're going to end up? Based on your if you had a crystal ball.
Those numbers in each state is a little bit different, but in general, those numbers are requirements to trigger additional treatment. So the bookends that we showed on that graph are really, depending on where that national regulation falls. If it's over to the far left, then majority of everyone, including Salem, will likely require some mitigation, source control, or treatment at the wastewater treatment plant. If it's over on the far right, then there are several, majority or almost a majority of wastewater treatment plants that probably don't need to do much. But those are trigger points at which the concentration higher than that will require action. And again, that action could be identifying sources and mitigating those sources, or treating if those sources can't be mitigated.
If I could add one more comment on that. The numbers that Jude was referring to were either parts per trillion or parts per billion, so it's very finite amounts when we look at those numbers.
Thank you. Mr. Staley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real briefly, I want to thank Brian and Tend and Lacey and Jue for their work on this. We didn't start this conversation until Brian became our acting public works director on or about January 1st of 2023. So this is new territory for us. And the level of expertise and understanding that we've developed over the last 10 months is extraordinary. We now have a better understanding of both the impacts of these chemicals on our water treatment facility and on our wastewater treatment facility, and we're preparing to make policy changes, and we're in a position to do that in a well-reasoned and scientific way. So thank you to you, and also thank you, Jude, as well, for your expert guidance here. I think this has put us on a good path forward, and we're ready for whatever regulatory environment emerges both on the wastewater and the drinking water side. So thank you to staff for that work.
Thank you, Mr. Staley. Councilor Stapleton.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add on to what City Manager was saying and thank Councilors Varney and Councilors Nishioka. They've really been the ones pushing from behind the scenes on this and asking questions after questions about this and who's paying attention and how are we getting this information to the public. I wanted to thank staff for taking a really complex topic and putting it in a very approachable, not too long, I know we were worried about that, presentation for the community. This is really, really important. Drinking water is one of those basics of a city's function, and I'm proud of the work that the city does and what you all kind of pull together to learn about and make sure that we have safe drinking water for future generations. I know that I have asked in small group meetings to learn more about what kind of firefighting foam that we use and make sure that we are up to date on that and doing all that we can to mitigate this in our system. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilor. Further questions or comments? Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you, Mayor Hoy. Yes, I have I've had several meetings with Mr. Martin, and I really thank him for all the work that he and his team have done to provide us this great information. I kept asking questions, and he was very nice in pulling this together and answering them when I came to his office. So thank you again. And yes, I almost would like to know how much PFABs are in me. You know, it's everywhere. I mean, it's everything we touch. And so it is something we have to recognize. And I really appreciate the fact that we have fantastic drinking water and with no industries contaminating it, so we can be reassured of our safe drinking water, which is something I feel is incredibly important that we provide our community, and I want to ensure that that continues. The PFAS that we need to be continuing to regulate are those in our waste stream, and we're already very low, and I think that we're prepared now to continue that research and testing and management when needed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm always reminded about just how wonderful our drinking water is when I go out of state and try to drink the water, and it's not drinkable. I can't drink this stuff. Yeah, it's nothing like our tap water here. Yeah. Other questions or comments? Councilor Phillips.
Brief comment, which is really everybody involved in the process. Thank you. I think this was a really solid presentation. I think it was pretty understandable. In areas where it's not, this is just complicated. So the degree of difficulty is significant. I apologize. I hadn't thought about this question until just now. I kind of take it for granted that we refer to these substances and chemicals as forever chemicals. And I don't expect an answer tonight, but I'm curious, do we have a sense of what's the half-life on these chemicals? My understanding with my basic science background is that when you have highly fluorinated compounds, that carbon, fluoride bond is pretty stable. So my guess is when we say forever, they last a long time. But do we have any sense of how long that is?
I don't have an answer to half-life, but certainly they are persistent, is the reason why we find them everywhere. And I think when we talk about mitigation, we are talking about significant treatment and efforts to get them out of our system to begin with. So it's not easy. Every article I see that says new breakthrough on treatment, when you read about the treatment, it is 500 degrees C and lots of pretty extreme situations in order to break those compounds down.
And when you say 500 degrees C, you mean Celsius?
Celsius.
Yeah, so very hot because they're such stable compounds.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor. I'm fascinated that you consider your science knowledge basic. Having sat through this small group with you on this, I'm going to go ahead and say I have a basic science background. You are more than basic.
Fair. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you so much. Ditto to what everyone said. And I noticed that my feedback regarding clarity in the website was received. So thank you. I appreciate that. You guys did a great job.
Thank you,
and keep testing.
Thank you, Councilor. Nice compliment. Yeah, I'm noting it. All right. Do we have any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was really informative, and I hope the public took something away from this as well. So thank you. All right. We are on to item 5B, and Transformational Habitat Restoration and Coastal Resilience Grant. And I apologize, I do not know your name.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce, this is James Winston. He's a new assistant city engineer with the city. He started with us about 5 months ago.
Welcome to the city.
Yes, and so I'll go ahead and kick this off as well. Many of you councilors have been out to Guerin Island, and as we toured the facility, we shared what was happening in the channel up above the Upper Bennett Dam. And we have a unique opportunity here to try and get some grant funding to help us get that dam replaced. And so James is here tonight to tell us a little bit about what that looks like and why we need to go after this funding to help us cover the cost for what's really needed. We talked about how great our water source is, but we need to get that the water source to continue getting to our intake so that we can enjoy it all. So, James, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Brian. James Winslow, Assistant City Engineer, as Brian just mentioned. And I get to follow the PFAS conversation with more good news about our drinking water with the request of grant application for a NOAA Transformational grant, which is in your council packet now. NOAA's had 3 grant opportunities. The one that we're requesting that application to go after is due November 17th. It's one of the third ones. It's transformational habitat restoration and coastal resilience in our communities. 1 to 2 $25 million grant asks. There's a pool of money of $240 million. That's an influx from the IIJA, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Investment Act funding from the Biden administration. So it's a huge opportunity to go after some funding that is not normally there. When they do these grants in the past and when they go in the future, there may not be the same levels of funding. So we've put a big team together to go after that. And with that, it's in partnership with the City of Salem, of course, and St. Anne Water Control District. And a huge thank you to Brent Stevenson and his team out there for helping us to work on that. We've had a huge team inside with Jason Pulley, Jennifer Mongolo, Robert Keller, Tammy Stars in our engineering and planning groups, as well as Carollo engineers and their team of sub-consultants that have helped us pull a lot of the numbers and the budgets together for a grant of this amount. And then Reese Consulting, who is really helping us to manage the grant application, the writing, the wordsmithing, pulling it all together for us. It's a massive task for this type of a grant. So huge thanks. We could not do it without them. This is a difficult one to read. I think the map over there might be better on the back wall, but this is a map of Guerin Island. For those of you who've been out there, up in the city of Staten, which is off here to the west. Guerin Island is a facility that you have all toured is in this general area. And the Bennett Dam complex that we're talking about really consists of 3 dams. We have the upper Bennett Dam, which is located here at the far eastern end. We have our intake here for the city. You wrap around on that north channel, and we hit the lower Bennett Dam, which then directs water to a couple of canals, primarily the water control districts and drinking water agricultural supply, as well as where the city of Staten pulls off of that canal. And then they have a power canal and spillback down in this area. That's the third part of that complex. So it's more than just the city's upper dam. It's really all of the facilities. This is a picture of Upper Bennett Dam in its current configuration. The city owns 66%. When we bought the rights to Boise Pacific, we got the other 33. So we own 66%. The water district owns 33. You can see on the left side the boat slide and then the concrete dam apron across the mouth of the river. This is the south channel, and then fish passage on the far right side. Here's another angle of Upper Bennett Dam. Again, the concrete apron, the boat slide, and then in the summertime at lower flows, the district goes out with their manpower and puts up what's called these wooden flashboards. And that helps to just keep the river levels high enough where the water is then directed, or there's enough supply to get in the north channel for both the city and the water control district. This is a picture of Lower Bennett Dam. And if I want to go back, Upper Bennett's about 200 feet across, Lower Bennett's 310 feet, so about the same. There is a fish passage over here on the right. It's old, is not working. NOAA and Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife have both identified as a substandard fish passage and really needs improvements and upgrades to really facilitate, particularly the steelhead. Why is it very important for us? The Transformational Grant has 4 main areas. It's productive fisheries, community resilience, habitat restoration, and tribal and indigenous or underserved communities. The community resilience component for us is really the water supply for both agencies, as well as everyone else, Turner, City of State, that pulls off of either of our canals or supplies. You can see in 1999, of course, ESA listed species of both the salmon, the Chinook, and the steelhead were listed. The city and district stopped dredging at that point. And so in July of 2000, here's a picture of Upper Bennett Dam and kind of what the river confluence looked like right there. In July of 2010, you can see that there is some gravel and sandbars starting to develop just upstream of the dam. 2014, much more significant sandbar right here. And in 2022, you can see a very significant island has developed and is now semi-permanent. That means that most of the flow, when it comes down the South Channel, is only directed back around in this little opening, and that's where most of the flow gets to the North Channel for both the city and water control district. One of the recommendations, I think we did an alternative analysis in 2018, came up with the preferred alternative, kind of an Obermeyer dam. This is something we continue to evaluate in part of the design of the project. So when we receive the project, it'll be design permitting of all 3 dams, and then construction of upper dam and fish passage on lower dam. That's the goal of our grant application and ask if we get approval tonight to continue. With the recommendation, the Obermeyer Dam, if you're not familiar with it, it allows the weirs to elevate, so at low flow they can be higher, all right? But then they can lower during high flows. That helps us with really that movement of those gravels. So with higher flows in the wintertime, the woody debris, those gravels will hopefully clear out from upstream. All the fire damage from the recent fires that is upstream as well, that'll all be coming down. All that material will migrate downstream to the other areas of the floodplain, the braided channels, to help establish habitat for the steelhead and salmon, as well as Pacific lamprey. So lots of benefits where our project would hit all 4 of those categories that I just mentioned and the priorities for this NOAA application. So you can see the Obermeyer, kind of the gate. You see the right is a boat slide. That's a little bit higher elevation than we would need, but something we would have. And then the construction of the Obermeyer gates with the bladders being installed and how they may operate. We've done some renderings. So on the left is kind of the existing, you can see the boat slide. On the far left of that left-hand picture, kind of the dam going across in a flow situation. And our amazing technology team under Nathan has put these renderings together where they've added in the boat slide and the Obermeyer weirs across, showing when they're raised, how they may operate. And then when we lower them in the wintertime with higher flows, you just kind of see a riffle, right? Just put that in there. Usually when they're lowered, they could be pretty flat, depending on how we design them, what elevation we put them to. But the idea is that, again, it's not just a dam, but we can lower it, we can raise it, we can control the flow for our water supply, but also that transformational benefit that really meets with NOAA's priorities. The application is, like I said, $25 million is the ask for the grant. The total project, our midpoint for construction with contingencies and all that, is around $37 million. And so the city will be putting in somewhere between $4 million to $16 million. A lot of these are numbers that are a really high level of probable costs. A lot of unknowns right now until we get really into design. What can we keep? What has to be redone? And what are the costs that would come in with a contractor and the final design team. But we're estimating in that 37 range for total construction. For, again, upper, design permitting of all 3, upper, and then fish passage just on lower. And then construction would be, we'd get the funds in the fall of 2024. We'd be able to start permitting, and construction would go through most likely 2029. So a 3 to 5 year construction period. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you. Councilor Gwynn.
Does Santiam Water District pay any of the cost too?
Santiam Water Control District is also contributing an in-kind amount for this. So the city and Santiam are strong partners. We're both committing in kind, and then we're recommending a $4 million cash for the grant application. So a total application of 29 plus our in-kind amounts. We're going through what those total amount would be, probably another million or two for around 30, 31. You know, again, if the numbers come in higher, then we'll have to reevaluate what those would be.
Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Welcome to the City of Salem.
Thank you.
So we're applying for the full 25 million. What happens if they say, congratulations, here's 10? What do we do then? Are you going to come, would you have to come back to the city for us to authorize the additional? I'm just kind of wondering, have we planned contingencies if they give you a grant award that is far less than the 25 million? And would you be coming back to council at that point for further direction?
I'll go ahead and take that question. Yes, we would definitely come back to council. We know we need to replace that dam. It's really, critical for Salem's water supply. Any money we can get to go towards that is a real bonus for us. Right now, we don't have money. We don't even have the 4 to 16 million budgeted yet. We're looking at the CIP. We'd have to make CIP adjustments, and that CIP, of course, we would show that, this budget cycle, how we would try and come up with that additional funding.
Further questions? All right. Well, thank you so much. Councilor Stapleton, do you have a motion?
Yes, I move staff recommendations.
Motion by Stapleton, second by Nordyke.
Thank you, Councilor Nordyke, for the second. Okay. It's past 9 o'clock,
It is right? past 9 So o'clock.
we're all going to start getting kind of silly.
We're all getting a little punchy.
Yep. There's not much to say here. It's fantastic work. We've all known that this work needs to get done. I'm excited that you guys found a possible solution. Welcome to the city. Thank you so much, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Thank you, Councilor. Further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Hoy.
Aye.
Councillor Nordyke.
Aye.
Councillor Varney.
Aye.
Councillor Stapleton.
Aye.
Councillor Nishioka.
Aye.
Councillor Phillips.
Heck yeah.
Councillor Gwen.
Aye.
Councillor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. All right. Councilor Hoy, item 3.3B.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move to table the recommended legislative policy statements and priorities.
Second.
Motion by Hoy, second by Stapleton. To your motion.
To my motion?
To your motion, please.
Thank you. Well, frankly, I was just surprised when I went through the staff report on the policy priorities that there was no mention of Measure 110, being that a short session is firing up in February and Measure 110 seems to be the hottest topic. So I was just concerned about that and want to make sure that we have that included in our policy priorities.
Thank you, Councilor. I don't know if staff want to address that at all, but we have had discussion at our committee regarding Measure 110 at our last meeting, actually, and it just hasn't quite reached the recommendation yet, but I see Courtney Knox-Bush stepping up, and I'm sure she's going to give you a much better answer than I just did.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Courtney Knox-Bush, and I'm here to tell you that, yes, the Measure 110 issue is going to be discussed on Friday by the Legislative Committee. That's the intent. We were waiting on all of the information to be coming out from various stakeholders that have an interest in seeing some changes made.
And so the idea would be that if the committee were to make a recommendation, then that would just come as an add-on to our overall agenda. And so whatever, if we were to pass something tonight, that would be included and be part of our agenda?
We could either bring it back, or we could wait and bring back the amended policy statements for your next meeting, as you wish.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councilor Nordyke.
Thank you. So I think this is one of the reasons why it's always helpful to have conversations at this level, because nobody can be in all the committees and nobody has time to watch all the committee meetings. So it's always helpful if you're not on a committee and you don't know what's happening behind the scenes to speak up and at a council meeting like this. So I completely sympathize with Councilor Hoy because I have not been watching the solid waste subcommittee meetings, for example. So I think it's helpful that we have this conversation. And Measure 110 is definitely a hot button issue, and I am on legislative committee, and I do intend on weighing in on this and have brought this up at Ledge Committee because it's a topic that matters to everyone and impacts everyone. So I think we really do need to add it to our list, and I would be in favor of tabling these until we've had an opportunity to get a more robust set. There are two paths forward, as the mayor said. We could either approve these as is tonight and then have legislative committee come back with an addition, which sometimes happens. Sometimes things come up as we get closer to the legislature, and this list of priorities changes in light of the very quickly changing dynamics that happen at the ledge. So you can either vote to table this discussion tonight or approve what's in front of you and trust that legislative committee will come back with an amendment. Those are some of the options as I see it. The only thing that I don't agree with out of the statements in here, and I'm looking for it, there's a policy statement in here about binding arbitration. Page 3, human resources, management rights, and collective bargaining. I don't support the item about opposing legislation that would require midterm bargaining. So that is the only other line item issue that I have with the statements as proposed in this agenda. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Stapleton.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I think Councilor Nordyke did a great job of kind of explaining what's happening on the legislative committee. I would be really interested to hear from other council members on their feelings on this, whether they feel comfortable passing what we have and coming back with an amendment for 110, which is the work that we're scheduled to do on Friday, or if we want to table the whole thing and have it repackaged and back at our next council meeting. Just interested to hear what everybody else has to say.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Gwynn.
I'd just as soon see it back in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Any further discussion? Councilor Phillips.
I'm okay with waiting 2 weeks. I just want to make sure that that's sufficient time it doesn't harm us in any way with our ability to, work with the state. I think that most of this isn't going to change, so my preference would be to approve this as is with the understanding that, an additional data points coming on Measure 110. And then I guess I have a question to my colleagues. I get that we're going to talk about Measure 110 on Friday, regardless. I get the sense that now is not the time to talk about our feelings or opinions on Measure 110. So I want to clarify, I'm advocating we approve this with the understanding we're going to get something on Measure 110. That's one comment. And then one question is, is now the time to talk about it? And how's that work?
I would suggest that at 9:15, it's probably not our best time for a conversation on it, and the more substantive conversation would be at legislative committee, and then we could have if we need to have a full council conversation when this is back before us, we could do that. But if you really want to talk about it tonight, we can talk about it tonight.
I'm okay with what you just said.
Great. Excellent reading of the room. All right, further discussion. Councilor Nishioka.
Thank you. I would say I'm prepared to go forward with what we have and then have brought forward the 110 measure at the next meeting. But either way,
Thank you, Councilor. I think given that this is November and the session isn't until February, that waiting 2 weeks is not a problem. So we can just wait and do it all at once. I think that's fine. I personally don't see an issue with that. If we were in January, I would probably be saying something different, but it's November and we have a meeting in 2 weeks. So I think it's totally fine I'm totally fine with the motion.
Yeah, thank you. I agree too. I think it's really important that everybody feels comfortable moving forward. Yeah. These are important things that we're voting on, and so I support your motion on delaying this for a couple weeks until we can get the full package.
Further discussion? Will the recorder please call the roll?
Counselor Nordyke.
Aye.
Counselor Varney.
Aye.
Counselor Stapleton.
Aye.
Counselor Nishioka.
Aye.
Counselor Phillips.
Aye.
Counselor Gwynn.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Mayor Hoy.
Aye, motion passes. All right, on to information reports. We're going to go through these in order like we have been. 6A, anything? I'll pause. Councilor Hoy, do you have something on 6A? Great.
Just a little something. When I saw this, and I thank you, I actually did look at the staff report. My eyes kind of went, oh my gosh, what was all this money spent in September? And thankfully, I reached out to Josh Eggleston, the city CFO, and asked for more information. And he gave me more information. When I first saw the list, I was like, who's driving 6 new Tahoes? You know, I mean, what's that about? So what he sent back really helped to kind of fill in the blanks for me, and I really appreciate that. I think it would be cool moving forward if these staff reports had a little bit more information so it wasn't so freaky.
So who is driving the Tahoe?
Who's driving the Tahoes? Josh, would you like to answer
It's
that
wards
question?
1 through 6, isn't it, councilors? No. Kidding.
Sorry, no, it's the police department replacement vehicles. But yeah, our purchasing administrator actually asked me today if we should include it in the next one. So we'll make sure it's added.
Thank you.
Anything else on that one, on 6A? All right, 6B. C. All right, and we have no first readings. Oh, so close. We did have one person sign up under number 8. It was Jimmy Jones. He said he's going to submit something to us in writing. He had to leave earlier. He's texted me and said he would send something into us. I don't remember the topic, but he'll get back to us in writing. So we have no first readings, no second readings, no public comment on number 8. We are adjourned.